There were minutes. I thought what we would do is perhaps take the item number 10, which is the review and approve the minutes of the August 17th meeting. We'll do that first. That's all right. I did provide my comments to Andrew, and I think he recirculated those, so I don't know if anybody's had a chance to, if anybody has any other comments.
I have the minutes, but I didn't see, sorry, do I not have the most recent? Were your comments just incorporated into whatever?
I don't know.
They were, yeah.
They were,
I
okay.
just
Into
changed it right now.
the last one? They
So
were
the second
incorporated,
version.
but yeah,
There were some minor changes.
Yeah.
If you'd like, I can try to.
Yeah.
That's it, I mean, it seemed fine.
The only question I have on the minutes was, it asks, the revised one, I think, says, others present, and mentions Jean Delios, Julie Mercer, Development Director Andrew McKell, staff remote. But it doesn't mention that Dr. Caroline Gauthier, who was mentioned in the minutes.
Right.
Should she be mentioned
Yes,
as others present, because she
Oh,
was
I see,
physically here?
yes.
But
So-
she's mentioned later on in the minutes on that she's,
Yeah, I wasn't sure. What if we have like a whole bunch of people? That would be ideal. But Is that the
sign-in sheet there? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's common to just include all the public
Yep.
people in the meeting?
Yep.
Well then, thanks for that catch.
Yes, good catch.
Any other comments on the minutes? We typically have a motion on these kinds of committees, I know, to accept the minutes.
Yep.
So when
I make a motion that the August 17th minutes be accepted as amended.
Second.
All approved?
I'm gonna abstain
Okay,
because I'm here, so
oh, right.
I know I can vote, but
That's correct. And then the other thing I thought we might do is just, I know there's a lot of material to cover tonight, and we have kind of a lot of work to do, but perhaps before we start getting into the formulation of the survey, I thought it might be useful if we have any public comments to just start to hear them now, because it might be useful to incorporate them into the survey questions. But how do we know if somebody is listening remotely?
I have all the participants here. If their video is on, you would also see them on the screen. But we have Jay, and Caitlin is taking minutes remotely. She's staff.
Very good. Okay, so we have no public participants
We do
at
not.
this point, so it would be kind of hard to get comments from them. They're not there.
I do agree that we should get them at the beginning as opposed to the end, because
Yeah,
I feel like we could have done a lot.
yeah, I wasn't sure if the doctor was part of the staff at the time or
I
not.
didn't
So
either.
I was, that was,
Didn't either.
I was remiss in not asking for that. That's why I put it at the beginning, so we can. And I would just say that if anybody does join us during the meeting and would like to make some comments, should probably entertain that at any time. And if it's not on point, we can always move it to a part of the meeting when those comments might be applicable, so. But I would just, for the record, just include the idea that any public comments, we welcome them throughout the meeting.
Great.
Okay, and then,
can I, it's sort of, I guess, a sort of a comment period type of thing. I did, right, sorry I couldn't make it the last meeting. I did both watch part of it, but read through the meeting minutes. One thing that I just I wanted to mention was that I know that because one of the big topics was the goals, right, setting goals, and I think there was a statement made that, right, the goal is to provide the I probably could read the minutes to get the exact quote, but something to the effect of, providing parking and accommodating for the most people. And I think that we're gonna probably need to tweak that a little bit as we go along. Because, my feeling is when it comes to parking in downtown, it's really not a majority rules kind of thing, because there are some folks, residents have a little different demand profile, or business owners or employees or just customers. They all have different demand profiles, and if it was just the most accommodating the most people, then homeowners would be, their demand would be out the door, right? Because there's not many of them. But probably, I'm gonna guess there's probably a consensus on that their needs are unique, that need to be accommodated. So I want to make sure that we got that into our thinking in terms of goals. It's not just the most amount of people, there are different profiles that I think we need to think through in order to accommodate when we really get down into it. So.
And I think that's a great point, but I'm looking back at the minutes. So the phrasing was maximizing efficiency and access for the maximum number of users while minimizing cost. So I think the maximum number of users is what triggered you.
Yes.
But I think and I agree with you. It's sort of like for all types of users. So again, maximizing efficiency and access, yes.
Yes.
But maybe for all types, as opposed to, we want hundreds of thousands of people to be able to park all at once.
Right, but then business owners could, park because, so I just want to make sure that as we're thinking through, I guess in my mind, that we're probably going to have to come up with use types and how they might be accommodated in the different scenarios that we build out. So, not
you
just,
might want to rank those. Like have the different use types and then rank them. I like your idea of that. Like one's a commuter, one's a resident, one's a business owner, employee. I'm just spitballing here,
Yeah.
and it can be different at different times of the day, in different areas, and thinking through that. I like that.
Yeah, and I think the way it was worded is to maximize the efficiency and access to parking for the maximum number of visitors to Reading while minimizing cost to visitors in the town. Parking regulations shall be based on the achievement of these objectives, provide public education on parking access. That's one of the items that we'd added to that. But yes, I think the idea was that if we're evaluating a particular regulation, if we try to evaluate it in those, according to those objectives or that goal, it will give us some framework to try to, because if you say, oh yeah, we have to allocate 50% of the spaces for employees, that doesn't maximize the value to as many people, right? So we have to, I think the idea behind that is to try to give us a framework to evaluate whether this particular proposal achieves the best goal for the most people. And I think that's the intention of it. But there's no reason, obviously. And I think the next part of the meeting, maybe when we start to review prior survey data and so forth, clearly is that's very present in all of those prior efforts, right? Because in what's happened, I think we've got this tremendous complexity on all the regulations because we have so many individual constituents, some of whom are quite small, and everybody wants to have a piece of the parking puzzle. And then the question is, how does it, then that sort of backfires in some way with respect to some of the comments that.
Excuse me, Bernie. I gotta go. I got a situation at home, so.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
I'll catch the replay on video. And
Thank you very
see you
much.
Next meeting.
Thanks, Dan. So, let's see, do you have the, can we talk about this legal question? Chris,
Yeah,
it sounds like you've handed something out, so let's knock that item off the agenda if we could.
So I sent Andrew he can get the full-blown copy up there. But I did speak to town council and Julie's circle that we had kind of when everyone was looking at it, it just looks like Chris can't do anything, let's move on. But now when you see the overall map, it shows that there's obviously a bigger picture than just the small area that I had. So in going over that 300-foot radius with Ivrea, Woburn Street, the one question that I had in that somebody else had, Woburn Street is at that point up there where it's cut off like that is part of the 300 feet. So I'd be have to abstain from talking about anything on that portion of Woburn Street that's up there. So generally, it's just the square that I've outlined. It's only because at the bottom, the train station is that entire parking lot. So I put those stars to show that the train station has the two lots plus the parking lot behind my building is that other star. So that just kind of gives you the overview of like where these specific parking lots, where the majority of parking spots would be. But I'm just basically not allowed to discuss anything within that red area. Everything outside of it, I'll be able to. So I think, like I said, for this, you guys can do whatever you want. You can say, do whatever, and I'm gonna monitor my own. It's just when we come up to voting, that's when I would like to maybe have the outer core, which is everything on the outside, and then inner, like A and B. And like this could be B or something, and that's it just for voting kind of purposes. But for me, I'll talk how I will, and then you guys can do whatever you want and never have to worry about something impacting me because I'm the one worrying about myself.
Okay.
So that's essentially where we're at with this.
So to the degree that we have any regulation or policy that impacts what's in this red-lined shape, we will try to develop a motion that includes or excludes that so that you can properly recuse yourself from that
Yeah.
vote.
And I will say, if there's a general vote where we say we're gonna make all parking spots in all of Reading $100,000 each, I still cannot vote on that either.
Yeah.
Because that's the overall.
But we
as
have
well.
to frame that motion to say
Yeah.
excluding this particular, we'll call it Zone A.
Well, I think it's more that if we're trying to vote on something globally, he will recuse himself. You don't need to reframe your motion.
Yeah, unless.
Because if we get to the point
unless
where we
it-
want to make a global policy, then we don't want to change the way we're making that. He said he will manage himself, so
Yeah.
we'll let him do that.
But that's essentially it. So you guys just carry on as if
Okay.
I'm not here, and I will carry on as if I am.
Okay. So, thanks for that. Any other questions on that subject? So part number 3 on our agenda is to review prior parking survey data, determine new areas of inquiry. So, I don't know, the package that I sent out, I have like a page and a sentence or so where I've kind of gone through the material that Andrew sent out. I started going through the 2009 parking study, which is voluminous. It's quite helpful and very instructive. It's got quite a lot of very helpful data in there, including things like the designation of different types of entities or zones and what is sort of acceptable parking practice.
Two things.
Um,
Or is that something
No,
else?
I'm talking about, there's another study which was not part of Andrew's package.
Oh, okay.
I should have clarified that. But it is on the town website.
That's the Nelson Nygaard study.
Nelson, yeah, I know Nelson was in it. I don't know if they wrote the whole study. It wasn't clear to me if they authored the whole
they did,
package,
yes.
but.
Yeah.
So that was, so that included kind of goals and objectives and data from the perspective of 2009, looking forward. Of course, now we have the benefit of the reality from 10 years plus later. But that does give, various parameters. It says, for certain dwelling units, businesses, nursing homes, this and the other thing. There's quite a lot of, kind of accepted parking allocations, parking spaces that should be or could be thought of as an accepted parameter. But so I some of the stuff we can talk about later would be good to reference that, but that's a pretty big document, it's useful. Maybe some of us could take a look at that, and, because I think this is very valuable information. There's a lot of public input there, so. What I tried to do is look at the other documents that Andrew sent out and that Julie sent out, and kind of just pick out from those what's relevant to this committee. There's a lot of other information in there that, is very helpful and useful to the town, but doesn't really directly relate to parking. So I just tried to focus on that. So I don't know what, we could talk about these things. I don't know if anybody has any other comments first. Why don't I bring up any other comments if you have any, and then if not, I can just go through some of these bullet points.
So I guess just from a process and timing, just because it is September 1st, last time we had talked about potentially having a survey during the fall street fair and beyond. So if we want to do that, I think we need to design that survey tonight, because it's our last meeting before. And so probably, we should confirm or deny that we want to do it, and how we're gonna put it out there during the fall street fair. And then if we say yes, then probably a great place to start is looking at the past surveys and say, same questions, or add more, or delete.
Right.
But because of everything that you're talking about, like the global conceptual, what did we learn from the other ones? We're absolutely gonna have to hash through all that, but if we try to do that before deciding about this survey, we're doomed.
Yeah, I think on the remaining pages of this document
Yeah.
is a proposed set of survey questions, a lot of which I, took from the other surveys.
Are these all yours?
Well, some of them are mine, but a lot of them are basically prior survey questions that, I assume that we were all gonna look at those prior survey questions, come up with things, and I just put a lot of them here so that we can talk about that. I just thought that before we did that, was there anything that people wanted to highlight?
I do have a couple, I wrote down a couple tidbits from reading through the existing surveys, and obviously some of them wouldn't pertain to this because you generally already know the answer. Like, would you rather buy something online or would you buy from somebody locally online instead? But it would lend you to think that, well, out of all the Reading stores, how many are actually sending stuff out as opposed to Amazon? Like, their business model is gotta be like 80-20 for walk-in traffic or something, or some don't even have. So, but the survey did reflect that a majority of people just buy it on Amazon online, or if they want to shop in person, they're actually shopping locally instead, which would kind of make sense, that you just want to see stuff before you're getting it, kind of thing. The biggest thing that I noticed is the number one complaint was that there's too few stores, and people would be more apt to come down here if there was more of a variety and a selection. And the top hits were just shopping and dining, which, as you would expect. So hopefully with the new restaurant going in over the post office, that will add a little bit more to that, and then maybe add more to the options that people have coming downtown, but then that means more people coming and more parking issues. So it's a good bad kind of thing. Most people did 1 to 2 places, which, is typical. You go to the post office, then you grab lunch or something like that. And then the number that stuck out to me is that about 40% of the people only come down to downtown for shopping about 40 times a month on average, which means the survey asked, do you come down like in a quarter, and it was 8% or something, so I factored that into this number. So 40% of the people spend over a month before they would come downtown, which just seems like a large portion. You would see it's like 38% like do once a week, or 25, I think was like twice a month or something, but 40% not coming down for at least a month just seems like a staggering
Now,
number.
which study, just, it might be helpful for people that
Yep.
might be watching, which study are you referring to?
So that is on, Julie sent the email, so that's the LRRP Customer Survey Summary Report. is where we're basing this off. And then obviously, a majority of people, how do they get to downtown? It's they drive. Was the number one hit from that. And they're just very comfortable with walking once they get down here, kind of thing. So, like I said, the biggest takeaway is that 40% of people just don't come here, kind of thing, that were actually willing to answer the survey in the first place. It just seems like.
So that is so the LLRP is the Local Rapid Recovery Program survey, so that is in the context of COVID, that was like, so that was asked. So in the last 18 months, the frequency with which people are shopping in person definitely went down for a while prior to when that survey was taken. I think it's probably rebounded.
Yeah.
Because that's an alarming number, but people were trying to not be in person in the context of that question.
Yeah.
At the time.
And that survey was done, if I recall, March to April of 2021. So it was earlier this year, but
Right.
clearly before.
It was before, it was
the
like as the
rollout of
vaccine was
vaccinations
just
and so
rolling
forth.
out, and so it's a,
And that's what I found also, that, so all the results show June 1st and whatnot. I guess that's when they put all the comments into the actual survey itself. I was just surprised that this was done so recently. I know Julie mentioned it, but I mentioned before, when Julie says something and it's hard to believe, it actually, like, this was just a couple months ago that we have this data. So subsequently, yes, the vaccine has come out and then other, obviously, issues. But, I mean, it is a good springboard, and I like that you assembled some of these questions based off of what is in there, so. I think this has to be more geared towards the parking aspect of it as opposed to like the 1 to 2 places, why do you come down? Like, I don't see that massively swinging. Because if I was answering the questions, a majority of the ones that I was answering myself in my head, and I'm only one person, ends up being like the number one-ish kind of way, hashing it out the whole way down. So, but that's just my opinion on things. But it is good to have all of this most recent, for the most part, data with this.
Yeah, I think on that study, which was actually done by the state, and it must have been done statewide, but we were given, or at least the survey that we were given was specific to just the Reading businesses that must have responded to that. Some of you may have been involved in that survey. I wasn't aware of it, but it was very good data. And yeah, I mean, I think that as far as the parking issues, I saw that on this question 12, the regulatory environment, it got the highest response rate. 58% cited that the parking regulations as an obstacle to business, and that in terms of the importance of strategies, the changes in public parking availability, management, or policies, the highest response rate, was for parking. So there were a lot of other issues that were in that study, but that one clearly stood out. And it was interesting too that 79% see amenity improvements, for alternative transportation or biking and so forth as little or no or moderately important. And then question 15 said more parking, and there was various comments that were made. I presume that was from business owners, but it said more parking was needed, a parking garage, free employee parking were some of the things that were also mentioned in that study.
I did answer one of those. I won't tell you which one it is. You can try to pick it out, but I did answer this survey myself. So it was done to at least my office. Somehow I got it. I assume it was through email, not like something under the door, because I know Julie had sent, was it Julie, do you know, John? That she would have sent out this survey to the businesses?
I think Erin and Julie, but I think Erin is the one who walked around downtown with it, and then they also,
Yeah, all of us did. We helped
you were all walking around downtown.
meetings at the Tin
And I know I shared it in a few
Cafe.
Facebook groups. It
I
was
would've
not just
got it in-
businesses, it was anybody. I mean, there were business specific questions and other people's specific questions.
So the data collection methodology was that the state formulated this
No,
thing?
The
This
town
is all
formulated,
local.
the state is saying like, please, everybody do this, but it's
Oh, I see.
Reading did it.
Okay.
the state gave out grants to a lot of towns to be able to do.
I see, so we conducted them, okay, that's helpful.
Yes.
I do believe though that, though the report, the survey is recent and the data is fresh, I think the time of the year might have had something, as has already been pointed out here. Obviously, just coming off COVID, going into the summer also, I think Reading traditionally is a very down, quiet center during the summer. And it would belie us, I think, to it just justifies us doing the survey for the fall to see how people are coming out of their shell, so to speak, because I can speak for one business that I know the foot traffic in our business, with the kids going back to school and people getting Pop Warner and people starting to come back in and put their lives in order back to some sort of normalcy. We've seen a little more, just in my store, more foot traffic than we have during the summer. So I'm just saying, I don't dispute the numbers of the survey, and maybe it's good to have. What would concern me is if we take the time and effort to put a survey together for the Fall Street Fair, and it supports those numbers back in the spring. I think that would greatly concern me, but I'm hoping that the numbers from the survey we put together will be a lot stronger. And as has been pointed out, we have some businesses opening, and there's another business where the butcher shop is, and so there are some businesses as requested that are trying to get up and running for the fall. So.
I guess I would think that that no matter what questions we have and how it gets distributed, that we need to take the information that we get from our survey, which will be worthwhile, but along with the information that was done in June, the information that was done, I'm looking at one for the was it the Reimagine Reading? Has a lot of the same questions. I mean, so there's a series of questions. Each one of these surveys will have their own biases, a different flavor, leading questions, all sorts of, inappropriate things to do as unscientific surveys, but taken in a group, I would, and mindful of the when they were done and why they were done, whatever, that it would paint some picture in terms of demand. Because we need to be mindful that we're trying to deal with parking not just next month or next year, but hopefully we can put in at least a framework that is adaptable to change over the years, and we're not, another group or us are not here, 2 years from now trying to come up with yet another way to do parking. So
Chair, you have someone on Zoom, Mr. Dave Talbot, who mentioned that he has a comment.
Sure, that would be helpful, Dave. Please go ahead.
Hey, thanks all. And I don't have the hand raising function on here, or maybe I do and I can't find it. But thanks for having this committee. I feel your pain. I was on such a committee 12 years ago, the thorny issue. And I agree with you. The patchwork nature of regulation is problematic, and I applaud your goal of trying to make some uniform ones, and that's going to be a tough challenge. I wanted to just speak to say that a neighbor of mine, Mike Secreta, intended to come tonight and couldn't make it, and he wants to present some ideas for uniform regulation. And so he asked me to just show up and say, hey, what is the process for him being able to maybe be on a future agenda and have maybe 10 minutes or so to walk you through some ideas? Is that something you can put on an agenda for a future meeting, like the next one?
Yeah, Dave, what we've done on our agendas and all of our meeting times have been published. So we thought it would be useful if we published a long-term agenda.
Yep.
Each one of those meetings at the very beginning will have a time for public comment. Our next meeting will include the Deputy Police Commissioner and I believe somebody from Reading Municipal Light. who are going to make some comments. And so, we'll probably try to focus some of our meeting to their analysis and their comments. But every meeting, we're very, very anxious to get as many public comments as we possibly can.
Thanks. Well, could he actually be on the agenda as speaking for neighbors especially in the neighborhood north of Woburn Street, and actually formally on with maybe presenting some slides, if he has some?
Sure, Dave. Could we have his name again?
Mike Sakraida, Sakraida.
Sakraida.
R-A-I, Sakraida, Sakraida. We
RAIDA?
correct, Sakraida. I know he and others have taken a lot of the ideas to heart, and the concept of sharing and how to make that work, and also how to free up supply if there's people from out of town that come in and park on streets and walk down to the station. That's part of what happens up here, and there's supply that could be freed up from by kind of defining who can park here, residents and employees, and who can't, and making it uniform. So anyway, those are some of the things he's talked about.
So isn't our next meeting a short meeting and early because of the holiday?
Our next meeting is at 5:30 because of the Jewish holiday. So, but we intend to meet it from 5:30 to like 6:55 or thereabouts.
It's from 5 to 6:30.
5 to
5 to 6:30?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that might not be the good meeting.
September 15th?
Well, I guess it depends on how much input we're expecting from the
From
other
the fire.
visitors. Because
Right.
if we want it to just primarily be a listening session, that's
Yeah.
doable.
Because in theory, the 9/29 one is when we're gonna really go over the street fair stuff. Because that's September 12th, so the 15th is, somewhat early, right after it, you know what I mean? So,
I think if he kept his comments somewhat, concise, that would be helpful for us. And if he would like to.
You can always come back to another.
Yeah, you can always come back to another. So what we'll do is we'll try to schedule them in. And if it doesn't take too much time, but we do have the two presentations as well from the police department and Reading Municipal Light already scheduled for that time, so.
Maybe the next one then.
Yeah, and Dave, I can send you the meeting dates and he can also send the slides in advance, so I
Yeah.
could forward them to the committee.
I would also think that, if he has some pretty well thought out concepts in terms of solutions, I'm not so sure that we're at that point right now. We're still in the data gathering, making sure that we understand the issue. And I wouldn't want him to put out these solutions before we're really ready to
I don't know that they're solutions, they're high concepts and
Okay.
thoughts.
But you know what I'm saying, Dave, right? So
I do.
you don't want to do it too early, I should say.
Prior to your joining, I did make the comment that 09 study was, had a lot of very good information on it, so would probably appreciate your, your history and knowledge of the situation. That could probably help us out as well.
Yeah, I think it overstated the parking shortfall.
Yeah.
But one last thing, you mentioned a survey, and John mentioned that it's unscientific or maybe. So I'd be curious to see the survey that you referenced that says everybody thinks parking is the number one problem as opposed to other ways to get into town or other issues, and who responded to that, because it is important that we know if you're basing anything on data like that, like who is it that responded and how were the questions structured?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do in our survey is kind of look at those prior surveys and try to understand what the questions were, how they were framed. Could we frame the questions differently to capture a broader response rate and one that's, more focused on parking as well. So our charge is to deal with parking. I mean, a lot of other issues in some of those studies that don't really, I mean, they're affected by parking and they affect parking, but.
Dave, did it sound like you were trying to get at different modes of arriving? Is that what you were sort of wanted to talk about as far as?
For me?
yeah, your comment about the, who filled out the survey? And then maybe like, it wasn't bicyclists or pedestrians or maybe
Right, I
transit.
mean, I heard somewhere that it was handed around to businesses downtown, and if that's where the data came from or predominantly, then sure, I mean,
It was a combination of businesses downtown and residents who either picked up a physical copy in any of the businesses downtown or who responded to it online from various local Facebook groups. I think it was also, Andrew, was it emailed out? It was on the town website.
LRP, yes, it should have been.
Yeah, so it went out to everybody the town could reach in a reasonable way. It wasn't just businesses.
sure, but do you know who the respondents are? Like, is there a geographic pin of where they live, or did you just have data from whoever filled it out and you don't know who filled it out?
I do have, there was 800 people surveyed and 26 of them worked downtown. And I was one of the 26 that obviously that worked downtown that filled out this the LRP survey, whatever it was.
LR,
Local Rapid Recovery Program, LRRP.
LRRP.
the rapid recovery, yeah, and I think, it wasn't clear to me how, from that, from the publication, what the total, because I saw that the targeted commercial area had 68 responses. And I thought those were mostly, that's what the survey, front page of the survey says. And
There
it's
was a
not
business
clear.
parking survey and then there was,
I answered so I'm commenting based off the residential one. Is that what it was called? The customer survey, not the Reading business survey. So that's the numbers that I'm pulling with the 800 people, 26 work downtown.
And that was a rapid response survey as well.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'm referring to the business survey, which included 68 responses.
And Dave, to your point, that I think the reference there is specifically says that 63% of businesses indicated the regulatory environment poses an obstacle to business operation, and half of them cited parking regulations as an obstacle to business. So yes, clearly that's a downtown business concern.
Thank you.
It may be a resident concern as well, but this was just focused on businesses.
And Chair Ms. Vanessa Alvarado also has her hand raised in Zoom.
Okay, yeah, I think, just let me kind of make a wrap-up comment on Dave's comment. So I think that the idea was that we have all these different surveys, these prior studies. The idea is, what can we learn? If you look at the questions that they asked in the past, we have the data from most responses. Would we, in terms of formulating our survey for tonight, I'm just trying to, what I'd like to do is focus us on just getting getting our survey questions formulated. So I guess my takeaway from that would be, we probably should have some questions about parking regulations and access, and I mean, that's pretty obvious, but that's what I would take away from that. The Reimagine Reading, I have a bunch of things there that I think would be useful. The shed analysis, I think I, for one, need more information on that, because I went through it and it wasn't clear to me. It was rather brief, but it had some interesting gap analysis that I thought was useful, because it showed us being short of various metrics that, I think we could, but I need more information on that. So why don't we talk to Ms. Alvarado, you said was looking for a comment?
Hi, thank you. Vanessa Alvarado, Mount Vernon Street. I'm curious about the survey in that, what efforts were made to specifically reach out to the residents and the neighborhoods that would be affected. And the reason I ask is because one of the reasons this committee was originally created was because of a lack of resident input. So I'm curious if residents that reside in these neighborhoods had special outreach done to them to make sure that their feelings on the change of these potential regulations and the changes to the streets would be considered by the committee. Thank you.
Andrew, you wanna take that?
So for the LRRP surveys, one was very business focused on a survey and the other was general customers. It wasn't exactly a parking regulation survey, so we didn't exactly target residents of the downtown on parking regulations in that survey. When it came to the 2020 parking survey, yes, residents that we could get the information for and had their emails for were blasted to with the survey. I believe same as businesses, we have a downtown database of residents and businesses and property managers and property owners, and we blasted it to all of them.
I believe all the residents in that area also received 1, 2, or 3 reverse 911 calls.
Yes, and we did the reverse 911 and we were downtown door to door.
So Vanessa, I think it's fair to say that the opportunity was presented on multiple occasions and through multiple channels, because there were also physical surveys, but just, yes, you're right, the participation was low, but it's not for lack of attempts by the town.
So thank you for that, Andrew. My only concern is that I both live in the area and have been following this issue closely, and I didn't receive those communications. So if I didn't, then I worry that many of my neighbors didn't either, which may have contributed to the low participation.
So do you have exactly the time of year that you sent it out? Because I remember getting it myself when I live on Linden.
I can certainly get
So I
that
think that
information.
might, because it was a while ago.
It was
not
a
like
while
a
ago, the
recent
parking
thing.
survey
That was at the end of 2019.
Yeah.
It was the
Yeah.
end of 2019,
Right.
early 2020, right when the pandemic started.
Which may be
Right.
right. That was a little bit of a crazy time for everyone,
Yes.
so.
Did you wanna make a
I just
comment?
wanted to say hi, Vanessa, Sarah Berglacchio. That's one of my things that I'm gonna hopefully do here is I wanna go door to door among the neighborhood and drop off the surveys. So I'll be sure to do that on Mount Vernon Street.
Well, I can do Mount Vernon, I live right near there.
Okay. Well, we can talk.
Yeah, we'll split it up.
Yeah.
But I think the purpose of this committee, or probably the biggest charge to this committee, is go out and get information from as broad a constituent base as possible, because a lot of the certainly there's been a lot of surveys done of the local downtown businesses and residents, but and everybody's been all the prior surveys and all the prior outreach that the town has done has tried to get people to respond. I think the problem is that people just don't respond until there's a new regulation that affects their street. And then all of a sudden they become concerned, agitated, and the town's accused of not doing their job to go, and I think from my very brief encounter with the staff on this subject, that the staff feels like they've tried to bend over backwards to get input. It's just very difficult to get it from people. So our charge is most difficult, and it's probably I don't know if we're doomed to fail, because there's just never anybody that gets involved until it's a problem. So our job is to try to not fail in that way, but to do as much as we can to outreach to as many people in the town and outside the town, quite frankly, who use Reading for parking, and see if we can stimulate some response and frame our survey and questions in a way that captures all the needs of all the people, not just the local residents in the downtown businesses, which obviously are going to be very important. But I think that's.
May I just briefly respond to that just for a moment?
Is that Dave?
Dave, yeah.
Surely.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I think with respect to Linden Street, the regulation you're referring to would have made a side of the street with 9 houses and 15 housing units, no parking at all, after decades of there being parking allowed there, and the other side employee only with residents allowed. And so it was, and none of those residents were notified before it was up for a vote, specifically that their street was going to be slated for no parking on one side of the street. So it wasn't just So it was a pretty, I just, the characterization there needs a little bit of a tweak. Yes, there's been surveys, yes, there's been general inquiries, hey, get involved in downtown parking, but we're a residential street. And so that very general inquiry was never told to us that they were gonna make no parking on one side of our street. So I just wanted to clarify what actually happened.
So I think thanks Dave, I think there's two things that we probably need to do outreach on. One is survey information, right, in all its biased glory, right? We need to get actual hard data that doesn't have that bias, and from that information, we can do our best to put together some recommendations, maybe one, maybe two, maybe multiple recommendations. I think where what Dave and Vanessa bring up is there's yet more outreach that needs to happen once those concepts are put together to get feedback on those concepts, and to me that's I think in that COVID craziness that's the part that didn't get done well enough previously, and certainly, right, as Bernie said, that's when people pay attention more, is when you have concrete examples. So I think we'll have two things that we need to make sure that we do a good job on public outreach. One is getting data, but the other is feeling out what the recommendations are and getting that feedback.
Yeah, and I think we're not a governing body, so what we can do best is we'll have recommendations that this committee comes up with. Whether anybody listens to them is a big question, right? But we will pass those back along to the parking, traffic, and something. PTTF.
Triple TF.
So we will pass our recommendation. That doesn't mean that they will follow them, nor will the select board act on whatever we recommend to PTTF. So our job is to try to get as much survey data, but also, I think as John points out, the very important part of making sure that any analytics that we can get our hands on confirms or does not confirm the survey data, or where it might be different. So I think we're just trying to get input from everybody, and I think to be more specific, I think we're going to try to do everything to get this survey out. We're going to go to the town day. We're going to send it out to all town meeting members with the hope that those town meeting members would reach out with this survey to their constituents so that we can get as broad a representation as possible. Go to the Rotary, the chambers, any other organizations, local churches, any and all other constituents. I think that's the important part.
I think what we can do to alleviate some concerns about the residents that are located in the downtown areas to just have one of the questions on the survey.
Yeah.
Are you a resident of the downtown area? And if we get 125 responses, I mean, that seems like a big number, but at least we can have the question on there to kind of pigeonhole it, yes or no. And then if they are, you might have to expand upon that, because we might get a lot of no's if people from not, you'd have to formulate it if you're a Reading resident to begin with, because you might get commuters, so it's skewing the numbers. So that's what we're gonna be careful with. But I think we can have it on there, just to see. And how you mentioned about walking around, I mean, we can definitely easily kill this area in a day between, I don't mind helping as well, so.
I have a quick question. So I noticed on these maps, there's it's delineated by inner core and outer core. So should the survey be sort of tailored to because there's sort of different issues for what's being proposed for those two areas. I don't know if that's getting too specific.
Because we all know what inner and outer core is, but I think the general population around us does not.
So your outer core on Linden
I'm
Street.
outer core, so that was.
So it would be a different
It's a different issue.
set of regulations for you or someone who's inner core. I just wanna make sure we really explain to people. You're in the inner core, how do you feel about this? You're in the outer core, how do you feel about that? it's almost too much information because there are so many little exceptions and things like that. I'm optimistic that we can do it because it's not that enormous an area, you know, and we know, I was very impressed with all of this data. And it was also, I was really, surprised to see many stopping points where it said, get more data from residents and get more data. It was like, yay. So, I mean, there's so much here and.
There's a lot here, and I
So-
think the big issues from my point of view are customer parking, employee parking, commuter parking, and where you put them. And commuter parking isn't an issue because nobody's commuting, so now it's more of, and Julie's not here, but I feel like the basis was we need to move the inner core parking to the outer core. And that was part of the project, was to try and get people to park in the outer core. And that's when the residents in the outer core are like, wait a minute, you're not gonna put a sign on my street, myself included, until you kind of know who you're trying to push to the outer core and how are you gonna try and regulate it. And it's, do you know what I mean? So it's very, if you can, like, some of those issues are keep the commuters at the commuter rail parking, and then it frees up my entire street. And then as well, if it frees up my entire street, then employees can just park on my street because it's technically free parking. So you're right, it's complex. And I can't see us being able to put that in writing on a survey to explain it to someone on Mount Vernon Street. So I can certainly go to their house and talk about it, which would probably be something we'd probably try and do.
So another question is the implementation timeline that was on the updated one, is this still what the town is shooting for? So is this what we're thinking is gonna?
No,
I
that's,
think-
that was a proposal, that's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, I would take
That doesn't
that
even
as
really-
all good information to stick in the back of your brain,
Okay,
and maybe
Right.
we'll adopt some of that, maybe not,
that was the old
but-
proposal,
Right.
that has not
okay, I
been,
wasn't sure if it was like, this was the plan, it got halted because of COVID and now we have some time to take a step back and get
that
some
was the
more data.
proposed plan, and then the select board said, we do not wanna accept this plan until you talk to more people, and now
That's
they're
why
us.
we're here.
Okay, all right, but
So there's
some version of something like this is what's gonna happen, but it won't be us, right? We're just
Well, I
gonna
mean,
get
we will have,
We'll be making a
we
suggestion.
will have to be, yeah, exactly, that's our job is to make suggestions
okay,
about a timeline or what regulations, which zones should be, shouldn't be, and so forth. So I think that's, the question is, how do we, I think the important question for a purpose tonight is can we in some way get a question that captures people's feedback on that, on all those issues? I have a question, a draft question in here that I think achieves some of that. We'll talk about it in a minute. Maybe we can just talk about other surveys and if I could just maybe run through the rest of this page one, and then maybe we can try to move to the survey questions. But the Reimagine Reading, I think the third question in that survey was a bit biased, because 38% of the respondents live in downtown. And it's not necessarily, in those 38 people, 38% of the residents in Reading don't live downtown, right? But 38, all I'm trying to say is that there was a slight bias, and all I'm saying, that doesn't mean that it's good or bad, I'm just saying that
I think the question was
broader-
unclear. I think people interpreted it as, do you live in Reading or work in, like, cause when you look at question 4 and you look at the data of like, what town do you live in? 1,435 people responded to that, and in that then specified Reading versus other town, and of course, the lion's share of them are Reading, and so I think that first, the question about do you live or work in downtown Reading, I don't think it was clear. I don't think people realized that meant like downtown, and I think a lot of people who responded to that, and a lot of people didn't even respond to it. 864 people skipped it because they weren't, I remember taking this survey and being like, this is not clear. I live in Reading, I do not live in downtown Reading. I live walking distance to downtown Reading, but I wouldn't characterize myself as living in downtown. But I live in Reading, so how did you expect me to answer this?
well, I think I apologize, it wasn't question 3, it was question 2.
Yeah, no, that's question 2, that's what I'm saying.
So it says,
Question 2 is the one that
but it
says,
says,
do you
do
live or
you-
work in downtown Reading? Select all that apply. But I think the use of the word downtown there wasn't clear. I think so people answered it, I live in Reading and I work downtown, not realizing that what they implied was that they live in the downtown area when that might not really be what they meant.
I see
But it does
what
say,
you're saying.
well, it does say, do you live downtown?
It says, do you live or work in downtown Reading? Select all that apply.
Yeah, but the two choices are live downtown or work downtown.
Yes, but you're
Not
assuming that
both,
people
so-
are all assuming the word downtown means the area that we're discussing, and I'm saying that I think people actually were like, well, I live in Reading.
Yeah, but
Is
I,
that
but I don't live downtown. I live in Reading, but I definitely don't live
I
downtown.
don't disagree,
Yeah.
but I'm saying the
You
question
need
was
a map
unclear.
for sure.
The question was unclear to users, so I don't think we need to read too much into that one.
Yeah, but 864 people didn't answer it as live downtown
Yeah, no, I
or
know.
work downtown, so, but 36% of the combined 1,400 answered downtown. All I'm trying to say is that the survey may be, it would be useful, I think, for our questions to somehow be more specific.
I agree, because I don't think you
That's, I
actually
guess.
got, I think you're right, this implies something, but I don't know that people were self-identifying correctly.
Right.
Can you ask,
Because-
sorry to interrupt, may I just suggest you ask people to put their address? Of where
That
they live?
might be,
Or street.
Street,
You can
In that same survey, right, later on down, it says, which of the following activities has brought you to downtown Reading in the past year? And only 3% said they live downtown, housing, and 1.8% said work brought them downtown. So that completely does not match with the other question, right? So obviously, right, there's.
yeah, people didn't get what they were
there's- yeah.
answering, right?
the question seemed pretty obvious to me.
Because you
Well,
interpret it a certain way, but that's the thing.
Right, and that's the
People
problem
didn't.
with, right, surveys are surveys, right? And you can only take so much information out of them,
So I think asking for a street is a great idea.
yes.
Yeah, to ask for street addresses, I'm sorry, I do surveys with my day jobs. Yeah, that makes it good data. If I could just say one thing, I don't wanna horn in, but if somebody asked me if I live downtown, I wouldn't say I do. I live in a 100% residential neighborhood, S10 zone, whatever the zone is, it's a residential zone. I actually wouldn't identify as living downtown. I live on a neighborhood that's near downtown. So, addresses.
Yeah, if we can get that, I think it would be great. And I think that the other, on question 11, there's some 985 responses to that where you had a high percentages. I thought this was quite interesting. There was a high percentages of negative, do you like downtown? A high percentage of people said, no, I don't, they don't like downtown. I mean, it's just something to think about. But then there were also a high percentage of like the way it was, and there were many, I couldn't believe how many people used the same word as quaint, walkable, charming, small town feel, and so forth. So I thought that was
So that's what we
pretty-
wanna shoot for, right?
I mean, I think, I don't know if it,
Are
I
these
don't
the
know how it
types of
affects
questions we're
parking.
asking, or what does this have to do with parking?
That's what I don't, I'm just trying to, I just found that useful because a lot of those comments also talked about that walkability, walkable, and that they like to walk downtown. They thought it was very walkable. There were very few comments. I don't recall any that said it was hard to, there were a couple of comments in some of the other surveys that said it was hard to navigate downtown walking, but in this particular Reimagine Reading survey, it was very, I would not have concluded that we have a walkability or an issue, but there were many negative comments on parking, development, and those sort of negative trends on the development of downtown. That was clearly, there were very strong opinions about that.
Right.
Which I think implies that it would be useful to have some questions about that on our survey, because there
I
weren't
guess
any direct questions.
Why is that useful? I mean, we should be asking questions that the data for which is actionable. I don't care if people want or don't want development downtown. We are in no way empowered to impact that.
No, but I think it's useful we might have to generate we might have to make recommendations that talk about the impact of development on parking. And if we
Well,
can't,
and I think we can talk, but it's like, if you want the survey to be as concise as possible to get meaningful data, you can ask all the opinion questions you want, and I assure you, this town will give you their opinions. They do nothing but give their opinions largely negative all the time. But if we can't, and that's great, and it's anecdotal, and it's interesting, but we're trying to solve a parking thing. And so if people are just like, well, I don't like it that these developments are coming in, That's a different issue, that's a different committee, that's a different topic. It matters that
I don't know, I
development is
mean, it's-
happening, but it doesn't
but it-
matter if
but
they
it-
want it to.
does
Like, we
have
can't
an-
impact that.
I mean, there were, I'm just making the observation that there were a lot of comments with respect to parking and development.
Right, but that Reimagine Reading was a broader survey about what do you want your downtown to be? And parking was part of it, and that's why we are referencing it, but the actual parking parts are what matters to this group.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the question in many people's minds is tied together. I mean, if it was, should we have, I mean, I'm not, there were a lot of, also, there were many comments that says we should have more coffee shops, or we should have less nail salons, or there
Right,
were.
but what can this group do about that?
That's my point, so I don't think
Nothing.
that those questions belong on our survey.
Yeah.
But the question of development, I think, does belong on our survey, just because it's so intricately tied to the availability of parking. If you said, let's take all the spare space in downtown Reading and convert it from parking lots to residential buildings or office buildings, that would have an effect on parking, and we should have a view on that. Or at
Sure,
least we
but
should
none
get
of,
the-
none of the spaces that we can impact in parking is up for development, right? If it's town-owned spaces, the town is not selling a parking lot to a developer. I mean, I think John is here and can very clearly speak to what can be developed and can't be developed and whether it's germane.
Right, which is important to going back to the goals, right?
Right.
That we set out. And yeah, I mean, if the goal here is to develop, right, some regulations and guidance on how to how to use the parking that we have, it's instructive to understand what sorts of demands are going to be placed on those parking spaces in the future, but it doesn't matter whether, the parking regulations don't drive the development demand.
Well, they do. They have something to do about the development parameters.
In the zoning, yes, but whether you can park out on the street or not does not. I mean, the demand's gonna come. The demand's here. And so so our job is how do we accommodate that demand for parking? If this board wants to say, we think that, only current business owners and residents should have on-street parking and, and squash everything else, any development down, we could do that, I guess. But I'm not sure that would be a successful recommendation from this board.
Well,
I'm saying that as an extreme.
I'm just saying that,
so.
in looking at all the prior surveys and all the prior comments, that was very strong feedback. And I think if we were not to have any questions about that on our survey, we'd be missing important feedback that people want to give us. And if they don't, if we say we don't want to hear it, well, that's great, but I don't think it's appropriate.
But I think
Not to hear
we're
it.
asking the questions, so the questions that we need to ask are, do you work downtown? How do you park? Where do you park? Do you live nearby? Do you know what I mean? Like, whether a building's gonna go up where Green Tomato used to be is irrelevant because the spaces that we're allotted to deal with aren't changing, whether they put up a 10-story skyscraper or not. Like, the parking that involves that building is their issue, not our issue.
Right, and what we'll need to know from that building, right, that parcel is, what that future demand will look like, and we'll get that, but not from a survey, right? Because that's pure.
Right, I'm not
that's
saying the
pure
development isn't important, it's important,
Right.
but people in the town, their opinion about the development is not relevant to our decision, like the data about what
Yes,
developments are
yes,
coming,
absolutely.
that is absolutely crucial. But somebody being like, I'm mad that there's development, that's not instructive to us, like,
Right.
development is happening and we need to respond to what is actually happening, not whether people.
I feel like a version of what you put in here could be tweaked to be a meaningful question for getting data, which is, once you find parking downtown, wherever that is, are you likely to walk around and do more than one thing? Because I feel like once people find a spot, the downtown isn't really that large, so then you tend to go to
Thank
like
you.
the CVS and the Cafe Nero, and then maybe you go to Pamplemousse and get your special wine, or you go to the bank or whatever. So I feel like if you could ask somebody, once you find a spot, which is always the tricky part, will you stay and walk around, and how many stores would you go to? I think you asked some sort of things like
Or
that.
if you find a spot, can you go to the bookstore? Do you get in your car and then drive to Pamplemou's? Like, that's another thing.
That's part of
that-
it, those are some of the questions.
Yeah,
in
those,
the,
that's a
Right.
great, and be like, admit it. Right. We need a whole section on admit what you're doing.
One of the surveys did have the number of places was 1 to 2, that was the highest ranked. When you come downtown, how many places do you go? 1 to 2 was the highest, which is obvious. You come down
Yep.
for one reason or two. Maybe if it was, the answer was 1 or 2 or more, you might have got a completely different thing because, you know, you go to CVS, pick up your prescription and then get pizza next door kind of thing. Like, that's 2 places, but, you know, would you have got pizza if you weren't going to the CVS? But it was 1 to 2 places was the highest thing. I think the biggest takeaway from me for this is the amount of people that actually filled in like comments on, it's a massive amount of comments that I know from me taking surveys, it's usually unlikely that I actually fill this stuff in. And I mean, people just went off with like lots of words and everything. It's comforting knowing that people in Reading are willing to do this. We just have to formulate our questions that we need answers. And it looks like they're gonna provide us with what we need.
and like
Can I ask you a question?
954 some comments that I think were quite, I mean, people took a long time, as you point out, it took a long time to write down these comments, and they, you know, yeah, they feel strongly about them, but just because they feel strongly about it doesn't mean you should dismiss their idea or dismiss
I'm not
their.
dismissing it. You're absolutely misinterpreting what I'm saying. I'm just saying it is not instructive to us in terms of what our remit is. If people are against development or if people don't like pizza or nail salons, our job is parking, not
Right.
what is going in the buildings.
No, but I mean, I guess my point is that if there's a parking regulation, whether it's part of zoning or whether it's part of street signage, that does not incorporate some comments about the, about the development plan or whether there is one or isn't one. It just seems like it misses an opportunity, to help craft the future, parking situation in Reading. If you say, if you say, I think one of the issues in last town meeting was that if you have development that goes to 100% of all the square footage on a lot, and let's say requires no parking, and it's all residential, well, that's gonna consume quite a lot of parking on street, right? So if we don't acknowledge that,
But John, don't we have regulations in place that dictate that if somebody creates a building, they have to put 1.25 parking?
Residential parking is
Residential.
required.
So there's already a regulation
Yeah.
about that in terms of the private parking pertaining to it. So any development, there are regulations in place.
yeah, but those can be, they can be, well, look, I guess all
I don't
I'm
think we
all
can
I'm trying to
impact
say is
that in
from
this
a.
committee, that's what I'm saying, like it's a
It
different
might not
kind
be,
of.
but I think in terms of providing feedback, a feedback mechanism for, for people, I don't see what the harm is.
Are there regulations in place for where that parking should be within private development?
It has to be, it has to be on the site. They can make arrangements for that parking to be off-site. We have never seen that even successfully,
I mean, it's been attempted.
any attempt to do that has been weak at best. So it's all been on-site parking.
But do you still need?
There's, well, I just meant like, if you had parking behind the building instead of in the front, that makes it more walkable, and that's gonna help get, so that you have a nice front and storefront that's right there on the curb, and then people park behind. That's a regulation.
There are regulations on where the building frontage has to be and how much the building has to front on the curb line, on the that's not the right word, on the back of sidewalk
Right away?
essentially.
Back sidewalk, yeah.
Yeah, so there are regulations on that, but honestly, downtown Reading is so small, and all the parcels in downtown Reading are even smaller, that it's not a matter, people do not have flexibility on different places to put parking.
Yeah.
It's however they can fit it in, and usually there's one way to fit it in, and that's where it goes if they want to do anything.
I'd say
So
we've had success with the design guidelines, getting parking underneath or in the rear
yes.
of new
Yes.
developments.
What we did do, and this is a little bit of a difference from downtown Reading, but the intent's the same, is that along South Main Street, coming up to downtown Reading, there used to be regulations where all the buildings had to be back 50 feet, and then the zoning went back 100 feet. So that meant all the buildings had to be back, and then all the parking had to be up at the front, and so that's what all happened. You had, as you drove down Main Street, you had, lots of parking and no buildings, and so now
Sure.
what we're seeing is that a little bit of both, right? Some buildings up front, some buildings back with parking, some landscaping, that building setback requirement where there is flexibility allows that to happen. In downtown Reading, there's so little flexibility that wherever parking fits.
I think, John, to
So,
pick up on that.
Is it within our
though,
scope to discuss the private, to discuss parking on private, or should we focus only on public?
I don't think we have any we don't have any ability to control parking on private.
Are you talking about the churches, Jay?
I'm just talking about in general, because it's been discussed lately that, or just recently in the past 20 minutes or what, about thinking through development and parking regulations within developments, and I'm wondering if that's even within the scope of what we're supposed to do. So is it questions we'd want to even ask, or is it something we want to concern, or is that going to kind of put us on a garden path and take up too much, time?
I guess all I was saying is that, I was trying to assess what the prior surveys were, what questions they asked, what comments came back, and is there a way to improve a survey to better incorporate the comments and the broader questions with respect to parking? That's what I think that's the focus that I was trying to bring to this. And if we have some data that shows, some comments about private parking or whatever it is, public, and, it's useful information that the PTTF and the select board and the broader governing body in town can use, I don't see the harm in collecting more data. I mean, the prior surveys didn't go in that direction. That's all I was trying to point out, that I thought those were gaps in the way the surveys were constructed, and because when everybody was asked to make comments, there were no questions about it, but there were clearly a lot of comments, so.
I think the one danger is if we ask questions about people's views on parking related to private development, it implies that we can do something about it when we can't.
Well, we can, all I'm saying is that the governing bodies can do something, if they get the information.
But the CPDC, like that, there are places where that conversation should happen, and it's just not here.
But, yeah, I mean, I disagree, but.
Okay, well, I'm happy to gather the information.
I think that's something we should vote on. Maybe.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we can vote on.
What's on the scope,
Like
you
what
know,
question,
like
what is our scope and what should be included in the survey?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Don't ask questions.
Or
Don't ask questions that might be controversial.
It's
All in
not
favor?
controversial. Don't ask questions that provide data that we can't do anything, that's not actionable, that's all.
I mean, we're not,
Well, it is data that we can pass along to the CPDC and select board. I mean,
and that's fine, I'm
I
happy
don't
to
know
do
if
it.
it's data, but it would be more.
It's not data, it's actually
It's feedback.
purely
Opinions.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
It's an
feedback.
opinion.
qualitative feedback that I think the CPDC and the select board have gotten plenty of earfuls. I'm happy to give them more, but I don't know that it's constructive. And
Well, I
if you
think-
want people to give you the data you're looking for, and you ask them extraneous questions, you just might get a lower response rate on the data that you actually want,
What
so.
if you say, if
And
you
should we
have more
Find out if they
opinions-
want that.
What if you say, if
Well, I
you
mean,
have-
I guess all I'm saying is that I'm all one for just collecting as much data as you can, analyzing it. And the survey data is one part of it. And there are lots of other data that we have to get as well. And I just don't hide from tough questions, that's all.
Nobody is hiding from the tough
No, but I think
questions.
the scope of it needs to be reined in a little bit, because it's very specific about what we're trying to get from
Yes.
people. We're trying to
If
get,
talking zoning requirements, it's a much different discussion
Right.
than zoning regulations. And while we would hope that whatever we get out of this process can be useful for that, I think it will have its own survey similar to what you guys do for other needs and data requirements. So we're happy to get whatever you guys can get, but it's just a different looking conversation.
Is there a sweet spot for the amount of data you should collect in a survey? Like, is there a particular number of questions where after a while you get fatigued? Actually, Dave said he does surveys, so I don't know if anyone wants to answer that question, I guess, but.
That was gonna be my thing. I think we should have like a cap on the amount, because if we were at like 376 questions, then it'd just be like, nobody on planet Earth is gonna answer this. But if we're arguing whether it's the 30 or 31st question and we're done, we just keep it at the 31 and just go with that. So I think it depends on how many questions that we have. If there's 20 or 21, that's not a big deal. If there's 276, it's not happening for anybody, including myself probably.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
think that
it comes down to
the
how-
Reimagine Reading, which was a lengthy survey, I think it was like 55 questions, but there was a fair amount of, qualitative, and I think that's one of the things we talked about at the last meeting, is that you can have the check the box questions, and then there's the open-ended questions, and I think that's where the open-ended questions is where you got, various responses from the people who filled out the survey. But anyway.
It is harder to fake the open-ended questions, because other people could just be clicking the box and just moving on with their day, but I see what you're saying. We just have to find a happy medium. If we come up with 20 and this is the 21st question, I don't see it being an issue, but if we start getting onto page after page after page, forget
It also depends on how you formulate them, and is it just click, 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 or is it a lot of complicated, but I think all we can do is perhaps get some questions together. We can perhaps get some input from professional people who do surveys and see if there's any better way to make it.
And I can add just to the prior conversation, we're looking to work with Mapc on some of the big conversations surrounding downtown, such as open space and parking. And there will be a survey on that as well, so that's where we're looking at 40R zoning requirements. So that might be a more appropriate place for those development type questions that you guys are discussing.
So that's independent from us? You were doing it already?
What's MAPC?
Metro Area Planning Council, it's a regional planning organization.
That's coming out of the various town meeting questions or instructional motions, and then
We held a workshop.
the
in
workshop we
March.
held, and that was in March,
Kind of
and so,
parking specific.
yeah, so we did have a parking specific component to that, we being CBDC, and we got some good information just in general about downtown development, but also need to sort of vet that out and have sort of some, right, it's all trade-offs, right? Anything that happens trades something off, so we need to sort of workshop those out, the different alternatives on what we want to be when we grow up.
Is that a public survey that's coming out, you
Will
say?
be, yes, yeah.
And then do you know when that one's coming out?
We're hoping to announce the whole thing in mid-September, so probably looking around the 20th to 21st, that will be released. So we're working on it.
You're saying that there's a parking element to that survey?
There was a parking element to the workshop that we did. I'm not sure, I mean, parking, right, when we look at open space, right, that's the major issue is looking at open space for downtown. When we look at open space, parking, right, and this is where we get into the private parking and the private demand, because when we look at open space and open space requirements for developments, the first thing that open space gets used for is parking. And so, right, that's not, I think, what people have in mind when they talk about, setbacks and open space. So we need to sort of think through, what other regulations besides the ones that were proposed, what does it get us to, and what does that mean for the parking that may be already taking up that open space that people are looking for. So it does involve parking, it's all private, but it impacts sort of the look and feel of those developments. I say that well?
Yes.
All right.
I guess, so I guess that survey with this survey, and is that survey with respect to parking gonna be consistent with our survey? And
Yeah, I think that's right. That's more of a workshop that happens to have some survey information that's gathered versus this, right? This is like, we're trying to cover everyone everywhere, right? I think that will have some explanation. Yeah, it's part of a more in-depth discussion that some data collection and survey comes along with it. If that makes sense.
I'd like
Who's the
to,
survey targeting with?
bring out is with this committee, I think, is to try and be more specific. I look at some of these questions and I don't know if anyone feels it would be beneficial to be specific and say, for example, give them a couple of targets like Brandy Court or CVS lot and say, how many times do you park or do you use this particular lot? Just with the hope of that survey gaining how busy an area in town is, specifically, maybe pick 2 or 3 areas. Selfishly, as I say, one of the lots that I overview see is very busy is the CVS lot, and a lot of people seem to get there. And I know there's a lot of data here, but I'd like to see how many people would choose, if that was their first choice, of how they feel different lots in town, and find out where the parking, where the people are going.
I was thinking that we could get, one of the there's survey data and then there's raw data, right? I think one of the items that I have in the back here is just trying to get retail customer count data from the various from the various businesses downtown. Because I know CVS absolutely has that. They know exactly how many customers come and go every day. That's one of their operating metrics that they operate by. So the question is how much, to answer your question, I think there's survey data, and then I think what would be useful information in addition to we could certainly get that data from the survey, but comparing that against the actual customer counts in the various businesses would be pretty helpful.
I do like that idea. I think the couple of things that I think would be helpful that isn't in any of the other surveys is to really understand how people, when they're approaching Reading to go do something, why are they coming to downtown Reading? But are they most destined to a parking, like, do they have a parking lot in mind? Where do you park, where do you most often park? Do you most often park on the street? Or is it a parking lot? What happens if that lot is full? Where, what's plan B? What's plan C? Do you leave? Or do you ever have to resort to plan C? Those sorts of things to really understand how do people navigate parking, as well as the questions, how many places do you go to when you do find parking, but really understanding the desire lines and the
Action of the behavior.
the actions that happen, more than, I'm gonna say, and I'm not criticizing what you pulled together, because a lot of this is good stuff, but honestly, right, do we care what the age of people are that are parking? I'm not sure we do. I think we might care how able-bodied people are and whether they're looking for handicap parking or not, right? I think that would be instructive, but if someone's, 35 or 55, so I think thinking about.
That was a prior.
No, I know, I don't, right, some of these
question,
is-
and I just pulled that question in.
No, I understand.
And I felt like
get
it'd be useful to
like the default,
get that, because then you can compare it against the prior data,
Yeah.
and then you can maybe get an idea what's the shift. I think that there is, in people's minds, a correlation between the need to find close parking if you're older than if you're younger. That's probably the intent of.
Yes.
I'm not sure why people asked for that, but I'm assuming that.
Yeah, and that was the other one, I'm sorry, I was thinking is, because Liz brought it up in a prior meeting, like, how far away, or even bring up this exact question, but, how far away is acceptable parking, 100 feet, 100 yards, 4 blocks, what's okay? And sort of understanding what that is for people, I think is probably instructive as well.
Are we asking what size vehicle they're parking?
That's not a question, it's in my draft, but that's probably a good question.
Well, unless we're gonna make a recommendation on lining this.
Well, there was some mention in some of these things about going to compact spaces or something. So it seems like it would be helpful to know how many compact cars are actually parking downtown. No.
Did anybody else have proposed questions? I just
Should we just
threw
start
these
making
out,
a
we
list?
can go, most of these are from other surveys, if we could just blast through them, we're trying to get a survey together tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just wanna achieve something during the discussion.
So to the question of how far would you be willing to walk, I'd love to ask a follow-up question that says, what would make you be willing to walk further? Like, is there anything that you would want on your walk that would make you, is there anything that we could do that could make you walk further, that the town could do? I think that'd be really interesting to see what people said.
I did not number these questions, but I have a question that says, if you cannot find parking at your destination, how long do you walk? Less than 3 minutes, 3 to 4, and I just simply put in that most people can walk a quarter of a mile in 4 to 5 minutes and a mile in 16 to 20 minutes, just as a point of reference, so that if people are answering the question, they can sort of think that, well, I'm not walking a quarter of a mile, because I know from certain streets, I know it's exactly a 4-minute walk from the street to the commuter rail. And, anyway.
Keep in mind our less abled residents, though, a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's my point, that some people would take twice as long, but,
That's why
But I don't think-
I think having the ages in there is still worth having, because if we get a survey response back and 85% of the people were, 25 or under, right? That just massively skews something the other way, where, you would presume that elderly people are less likely to walk further distances. If I was to answer one of the questions myself, why would I go to CVS to pick up a prescription, drive in, and the lot's full, what are my options? What's my plan B? That's, I go out, drive around, and then maybe I park over at Bank of America Christopher's. But if that's filled up, I'd make another lap, hopefully find another spot, or then go back around, and then I'd be willing to walk because I'm picking up a prescription, I have to do it. I can't just all of a sudden change my mind. So now I'm more willing to walk because of it. Am I gonna do that for a pizza? Probably not, I guess. Like, I'm forced to do it
Well, if you ordered
because-
it.
Yeah.
If I ordered it, yes, but I might double park and run in and kind of do it and then become Cambridge. So,
Go to the city.
yeah, it's,
Or you could park in front as well, or you could park
Yeah.
across Main Street. I mean, I park across Main Street all the time.
Yeah.
And just walk
it
across the
is,
street.
it's that
So-
mental that you're not willing to turn around and go the opposite way to go across the street. It's a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like having the age question just to keep
Yeah.
it in there, only because if,
And it's probably,
We need-
again, I just cut and pasted this, but it should probably not be from 65 to 74. It probably should be 65 to
plus.
plus.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's the wrong age bracket. We could make those age brackets smaller.
You need to
To
tighten
make
them
it
up a
quicker?
little bit.
I mean, I don't care.
Yeah, I like smaller to make it quicker, eliminate one or two of them.
It seems like the more yes, no questions, the easier it'll be to tabulate data, so.
Yeah.
Some of these look like they could be.
And you have to think that if they're filling this out at the street fair, they're not gonna wanna spend 10 minutes.
Correct.
They just wanna do it
Well,
quickly.
are we making this so they use the
Hopefully-
QR code
Hopefully we
and do
can
it
do,
all?
hopefully we have both.
So they do it all on their phone? Oh, you're gonna have some paper and then some QR code?
I think that was the idea. Just capture
You could just
everything.
ask their age, and then you could bin it as you see the data come in.
That's true.
You could do that as well.
Yeah, you could do that.
Are we just going down the line?
I mean,
We're doing?
unless somebody's got a better idea.
Yeah, no, let's do it.
Do we need to know if they're male,
Male,
female, or
I mean, I think for purposes of shopping and things, that's a huge operating metric for retail.
Gender?
But we're just trying to find out where they're parking.
Yeah, but if it's a female, and then the follow-on question is, well, there's one, are you traveling with somebody, with your kids, with your, I mean,
I guess for me, I would probably skip that one only because I don't think it matters, I guess, like, yes, it does to people, because if we find out 80% of everyone coming downtown is females with kids, obviously now you're
Yeah,
more
that's
skewed to do
that's
whatever, but
important.
for parking,
yeah,
I
thought
don't
that-
think it matters if it's me or Liz parking. Either one of us is gonna do, if we both have the same brain, either one of us is just doing whatever we were going there to do in the first place. So that comes into are we at 30 or 31 questions? I think that's one that we can definitely just scrap to fit more in, that people are more apt to answer because now there's less questions.
The retail data would probably.
But it would be.
The retail data may give you that as well, but it's hard to tell. Hard to tell if they track it that way. Yeah, I was just thinking that if it's a parent with, 2 car seats and they're trying to pick up something and you can't lock your kids in the car because somebody will call child services on you, and you have to gather them all together and schlep around, that's important information for parking. That was sort of the idea.
But that's not, I mean, just anecdotally, would you like to know how many men come into my store with children versus how many
I'm
women?
not saying it should be one or the other.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's not, your question is, do you have kids, maybe, but it's not, are you male or female?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Should we vote about the questions and then just go back and refine them, just to kind of go through this faster?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can just say skip that question. We'll
Okay, let's skip 2.
take that out and then,
The living one, I think, could be Reading, outside of Reading, and employee.
Okay.
And I think we wanted to,
Reading contiguous
previously we mentioned, let's
community
add an option for people to add their street
Right.
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reading Street.
I think that's a great idea, but when you pull that data,
It's gonna be tough.
you grab that and use it might be tough,
Well, I think it becomes another one of these big spreadsheet tabs, but
which is
where we
fine.
can then just like go through and be like,
Yeah,
It's
maybe-
everybody from Mount Vernon and Linden. Wait a
That's what I was
minute.
that's what I was gonna say, we can pull out the 10 or so hot streets that are in the core, and then focus on that, and then we
Yeah.
still have the
Yeah.
outside data.
Yeah, I mean, the street was to avoid the problem of, do you live in downtown or not?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So, if we wanna track it, we can, we might get people to fill it in, we might not.
So.
So the question is, do you live in Reading and
Street,
and then ask them for the street?
yeah,
Yes.
and then contiguous communities outside.
Do we just say neighboring town? Like,
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah,
we don't care,
need to
we don't
know.
care
We need all the
anywhere
specifics.
else, right?
Yeah, so just make it,
Because there's
so
not gonna
it's
be
just three
commuters at
options,
the,
Reading, outside Reading, and someone said, are you an employee, is that?
Well, I think that we'd like to find out from employees some information from them. Like, I feel like a big part of it, it may not even be this one, it may be a different
Maybe not
thing.
here, because this is about where you live.
Okay, but I think polling employees is a big part of
It
this.
is. I think that's further down though.
Is it, I didn't,
Yeah.
But whether
I think
whether
we-
it
I think we
exists or
have some
not,
of
it
that.
should be further down.
So just
Well, I mean,
Reading,
or,
Reading, fill in the street.
And outside Reading,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I think the sticker question should go with the employee question. Or
There's
do
many different
non-resident
stickers.
sticker.
There's some.
has like a lot of different stickers.
So are you asking sticker town-wide or downtown
Yeah.
stickers?
Stop,
Everything's
down,
been suspended.
Stickers is very tricky too, because
yeah, you
they're
have
like
the compost
like-
sticker, which is a lot, which is
Downtown resident.
resident.
But
which
I think what
allows
he's
it
saying is
right
like
there,
let's
and then-
capture this, let's put the list of here are all the
You gotta-
parking permits that exist and
Right.
people can check off if they have any
Okay.
of them. Why not?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was just, that's the, I have the
Yeah, I
following
see.
parking sticker, list them
Yeah.
all.
Oh, permit,
check 'em.
following parking permit. They're
That
not all,
way it just,
they're not all
trying to create
stickers.
something that
Right.
people
Not all
can just
stickers.
like bang, 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 bang.
Check, yeah.
But yeah, as long as it's a
Don't make it too
checkbox, they're
complicated.
likely
Checkbox.
to continue.
And the order of these was sort of like stream of consciousness. I was trying to follow the structure of the prior questionnaires, but
No, I
We
can
can-
appreciate
we
that
can
you put
create
all of these
more.
together.
Yeah,
Like, I don't have
Absolutely.
30 questions written down, so I mean, it is a framework.
Sticker application paper. You can see all the different ones.
oh, that's all this parking stickers.
For the community access stickers, not for the employee ones.
Right, and again, we don't wanna use the word sticker, we wanna use permit, because they're not all stickers. As a person with an employee permit, it hangs from my mirror, it is not a sticker. FYI.
There's a sticker on it.
Sticker slash permit.
That's true.
There
Okay.
is. That's faded in the sun.
Okay, downtown, so, and then the other question was, do we structure some questions for downtown and not downtown? That's another,
Or do you wanna call it the
Meaning.
inner and the outer, so we can.
no, I was thinking of,
Oh, outside
I was
people who
thinking
don't
of out back, the restaurants down by,
live
the,
Walkersbrook Drive.
yeah, Walkersbrook Drive, the people there,
But I don't think we're
I don't think they have a
I mean,
problem
just-
we need to solve.
I mean, I guess the idea was, if you're not, if you're impeded from parking here, are you therefore going somewhere else? And I think that's the intent, to try to measure whether we're losing, I don't think the business would want that information, that I've got a lot of people who would have come here, except, no, I decided to go somewhere else. That's important information. I mean, any business would want that.
Yeah, businesses would want that, but I'm not sure.
That's,
I mean,
I think there's something.
I think we wanna know how,
Am
Yeah,
are the regulations impeding somebody from coming downtown?
if I can't find parking,
I'm gonna go somewhere else.
what do I do? I mean, I think that's the
Right,
question.
so you talked about going to CVS and driving around the block. I tried to come to CVS, I just went to Target. I didn't even,
But if you had a prescription and you had to pick it up there, then you really don't have another choice.
I can
But
back-
you're most likely to go to Target next time and change your whole.
Yeah, unless you
But
decide.
if there was a spot in front of Biltmore in Maine, you know where I'm talking about? You know that restaurant? There wasn't a spot in the CVS lot, there wasn't one, but if you could park at Biltmore in Maine, you wouldn't do that. You would drive an additional 10 minutes.
because I was probably going for something else. Because for me personally, I just walk to CVS and get it, cause I have the luxury of doing that.
Right,
So I don't have, do you know what I mean? But would never think to park in front of Biltmore, Maine to go to everything but the dog. Like, I go to everything, I always come back. If it's busy, I just come back.
I know when I'm going to Biltmore, Maine, I never am getting a spot in front of Biltmore, Maine. Unless I go there at 12:30 at night, I'm parking out back or on the side or wherever
So
it
it's
is.
very
It's just
interesting.
never happening.
If I had to go someplace, then I would absolutely park farther and walk to it. But my visits to downtown are never desperate that I have to go for that moment. It would have been when my kids had an orthodontist, like that I had to go there and I had no choice and there was a time behind it. So it would be interesting to see what people that visit the dentist and the doctor's offices have a different mindset to this, other than just a person that visits downtown, me. You know, I would just come back.
So there's a bold-faced downtown parking question, so I didn't want to get off into another tangent.
Yeah.
You know, say, there are some, and then some of these may or may not apply to, and you may want to collect data that says, is something happening that's driving visitors away? That's all. Thinking about, now this is, and I think the idea here was that we request that you answer all survey questions by thinking about your post-pandemic lifestyle. And then also refer the survey to anyone who parks in Reading. We need everybody's input, so we can maybe.
Can we shorten
Get
that to, how do you go downtown?
Right, like you have your overview at the top, I don't think we need to keep reiterating the post-pandemic plans within the
Yeah,
question.
I put that, after I started putting it in every question, I just put it on the top, so.
Okay.
That was good. Thank you.
Okay.
So how do you get
Same with
downtown?
the next question.
Check all that apply.
Yeah, check all that apply.
How long do you usually park on the next one?
Yeah,
How
I
long
like-
do you need to park? or-
I
How
like
do you usually
shortening,
Usually, yeah.
shortening the question also makes it more apt for somebody to answer it, so yes.
Usually or need to? What is that, are we suggesting changing?
I think we need to
Well,
add
need to
usually.
refers to one time, right? I mean,
Yeah, usually, like an
Okay.
Right,
average.
So you want to substitute usually for need to?
yeah.
I'm a fan of one-syllable words. There's a society of one-syllable people that just like to write in one-syllable words. Anyway, how long do you usually park downtown?
How long is your typical visit? Is that kind of the same?
I thought it might be.
You just delete that?
Yeah, just ask it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because these numbers can kind of gauge what parking regulations would be. If everybody puts 2 to 4 hours, like if you have 99% of that, you just know that all these other things are pointless.
The next one's good, how many visits,
So wait, did we just combine the
think we
visit
just
and
deleted
deleted the visit one? Delete the visit one and just keep the column.
So there is a little bit of nuance there, and I don't know if it matters if we pick it up or not, right? If how long you visit, maybe, would people that walk
Right.
visit longer?
Well, I guess if we're trying to solve the parking problem,
Yeah, let's stick to the part.
how long do you
Then
usually park
park,
is really the
yes.
question we need to answer,
Well,
not so
and
much
how
the
are you
visit.
gonna know if I live here and I work down here? My usual visit is 7 hours, but you don't have here that I'm
Right.
parking here
Yeah.
to work. So is there a way at the beginning
I
of
think
this
there's
section we can
those
say for
questions,
customers only?
those questions are below. There's a question about that
Right, but
below.
if I'm just doing it from the beginning, I don't know what's below, so I'm gonna say, well, I'm usually here for 7 hours. So is there a way that you could just add downtown parking questions, customer only or non-employee, just so that people know employee would be following?
I think
Later
this
on.
is just a
Let's
rough
keep
draft
that,
of
yeah,
what
let's
we-
keep that in mind. I think
Just keep
you,
it
I
in
think
mind
it's,
for later, I
I
guess,
think
because
the
I haven't
data
read all
are
the way
really
through.
important, and let's just figure out, after we kind of go through the whole thing, maybe we can
Yeah,
Pick the top
reorder things
5
and categorize them. We
right
could-
out of the gate.
We could categorize them, we can,
right, okay.
how many
The stops do you
visits,
typically
now
make?
this,
I think stops is a better word than visits, yeah.
stops is better than visits, you said?
Yeah, because visit again implies that overall, like
Yeah.
I'm downtown with the
I
visits.
had a whole visit and I had 5 stops, that's the whole.
So for the next one, it's the same as the one before where you say check all and apply. Walk,
During your
drive,
trip,
or-
how do you get?
Yeah.
Yeah, in other words, do I park one place
walk a little.
and go, and I do three stops, but I walk in between? Or do I have to go to, from the
Drive.
bank to Walgreens to, Walgreens or someplace else? And I have some groceries or whatever.
Is the nomenclature here, should it be during your visit? How do you get from one stop to the other? So a visit is the,
Oh, yeah, I see.
maybe even your downtown visit.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
During your trip, how do you get from one stop to the others?
No,
You
because
take
that
the one
could
above
be, that could be, I go to Target in Woburn and then I come downtown and then I do, right? It's gotta be we care about your
Connected to the
your
question
visit
above.
downtown.
During your
Right, so the
stay.
first, the one above it should be, during your downtown visit, how many stops do you typically make?
And then a subset of that would be.
And then during your visit, how do you get from one stop to the others?
Yes.
Wait a minute, so,
If you make more than one stop,
Instead of how many, she wants to say during your downtown visit, how many stops do you typically make?
So we're being painfully clear that it doesn't matter if you went to Chili's.
Yeah.
That is not what we're talking about.
during your downtown visit, how many stops do you typically make?
And the
I think
next
one,
one,
two,
and maybe
three,
if
more
you
than
make
three
more
is
than-
enough
Yeah,
categories?
during your,
Yeah.
during your visit, how do you get from one stop to the others? Check
Do
on
you wanna say during your downtown
No, we just said it, so I think that's all right.
take out trip and put in visit.
visit?
And I do like that it's 1, 2, or more than 3. Like I said, it's gonna, if you would find out 95% are ones,
Yeah.
that skewed the 1 to 2 from before on a
Right,
prior survey, so that's good.
yeah, and if it's combined with the time, how long do you usually park? Less than 15 minutes, I make one stop, that tells you
It's a massive swing.
during your, how do you get around, Reading is adequate. And I think this was some, there's part education in some of these questions, because I think to try to avoid the opinionated sort of off-the-cuff comment that I hate parking downtown. The idea was, first ask, Reading has adequate parking for my needs, yes, no. Then the next couple of questions are, and I have to get
Well,
this,
that one there, reading is that a park for my needs, yes, that you might take as a positive. But if it's a no, wouldn't you want them to, don't you want to give them a line, why not, or do you want them to explain? In other words, if it's a no, explain. Do you want to comment there, or, have them explain? If it's yes, we'll take yes, but
Yeah, I'd like
give
to know
them,
what the comment is.
Reading has adequate park for my needs, yes, okay. But if it's a no, then the next thing should be explain.
Yeah, either way.
I'll
Because
comment
they
either
also
way,
might
right.
wanna
I'll
comment
comment.
and say
I'll
yes, because I'm
comment.
willing to walk for a
I
walk.
think we're leaving
Yeah.
that,
yeah,
So
comment.
add an open-ended after that.
So we'll have a comment
Okay.
sub-question after
So wedding
that.
has adequate parking for my needs, yes or no, and then open-ended comment.
I have an idea for a question.
Tell us.
If someone says that they have more than one stop, so 2 stops at least, the question is said, if you weren't going to your primary stop, would you have gone to your secondary stop? So did the primary stop bring them to, like, would they have gone to the secondary stop if they didn't have to go to the primary stop? So when you guys are talking about, dentist place being the primary thing and then maybe a secondary thing being grabbing a pizza or whatever it happens to be, would that have happened had the primary not been there?
I'll challenge you, because I like the question, but to me, that seems more of a, I'm gonna say a place building question and less of a parking question.
It's fair.
I agree.
Yeah, because if I went to CVS to get my prescription, would I have got the pizza? I don't know that that's true or not, so it's,
I
yeah.
mean,
it
that's a
doesn't
whole
seem-
lifestyle.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, right, yeah.
A parking issue, then it's the same point where you go to CVS because you have to get your pharmacy, so you deal with it. But, because you're talking about necessity trips versus, kind of, choice trips, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
And so you're losing out on revenue from choice locations, and you're only getting it whenever there's necessity is happening versus, this is a thought. So you could be losing out on people not parking there, and that's a way to get to that question.
I think we're realizing CVS brings a lot of people downtown. Now we just have to
Love
think of
CVS.
another reason to stay.
CVS has everything, is the
There-
greatest.
But I think there are a lot of people, this gets into the later questions, but I think a lot of people that come down for various services. Like, I don't know, doctors, hair appointments, physical fitness, and, you know, while they're there, you just don't know what they're doing.
But I would
And I
posit
see-
though that almost everything that you can do downtown, you could also do not downtown. So if you're making a choice to get your prescription filled at CVS downtown versus going to Target, it's because you're like, because I go downtown.
Yeah.
And if you're making a choice to go to get your hair done downtown, it's like, I can do it because I don't wanna go to the eye dryer. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, because right, if you live on the south side of town, you could easily go down to Redstone and probably get this or in that area of
Yep,
Stoneham, and pretty much get everything that you could
Right.
do. You could get except a nice bookstore in downtown Reading.
And-
Right.
And that has
But
not-
people don't necessarily always make that choice.
and similarly, like,
Parking.
if you're choosing to go to the dentist downtown, and don't even get me started about all these medical and dental
Yeah,
things that
right.
shouldn't be in our downtown
Right.
business spaces, they really should, you want things with walk-in traffic. But it's like, yes, I'm choosing to do that versus just going over to Walkersburg Drive, right? I mean, the choice is there. So if you've already chosen that I'm gonna do my business there, it's because you're gonna do things there.
But that whole issue, that very issue is precisely what the retail planners in these companies do, right? So that's why you have a CVS in North Reading, or something in Stoneham, Wakefield, and so that if there's any friction, that there's easily another outlet that somebody can go to. Well, I think it's an important question, Jay. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase the question such that we're trying to, because our focus is parking, right? So the question is parking, if you can't get parking for one of your visits, does it mean that you went somewhere else and you therefore didn't do the other two things that you normally do here? I think that's what you're trying to, I can't articulate it quite.
Yes. No, I get what you mean. There's like different levels of your desperation of needing parking.
Yeah.
Where, depending on what the purpose is.
We kind of voted to pass on it. When John said
On that discussion.
it was really not really relevant.
But I do think, I guess, right, part, there is a question in there that I think is directly relevant for this, which is, you know, and I don't know where it would fit in here, and maybe you have this later, but if you answer no to Reading has adequate parking for my needs, the follow-on question that I want would be, does parking cause you to go take your business elsewhere? Like, is that ever a reason not
It's
to
easy.
be in Reading?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's like another sub underneath it.
And
Now
I'm
we
happy to
realize-
get that, like, let's add that question. But again, I would then throw out, what is this group gonna do with that information? That's interesting to me as a retailer.
Yeah.
I am delighted with the question. I'm just saying, I don't know that it's,
Well, the reason why I
Sure.
think it may be instructive is it's how rigid is the demand that we have, right? Is it
Yes,
is it
elasticity.
sort of flyby, you know, there's parking available and so it gets filled up, or are people, to me, in my mind, it goes back to how many people are circling around trying to find parking, versus because they have to versus, you know, it's easy.
Yeah.
and
It gets back
again,
to
we
the
also need to be
elasticity
careful
part,
of
man.
like the accuracy of self-reporting.
I-
And also like the level of crazy of like, I'm not willing to circle the block once, but I will drive to a whole separate town.
Yeah.
I will invest 20 minutes additional.
Because I
Right?
then spent $200 extra because
Right,
I
but I
didn't
mean-
spend 20 here.
And there's also like, again, as somebody who has like infinite anecdotal stories of people being like, oh my God, it was so hard for me to find parking. And then they literally like, I had to park 3 spots down. And so somebody's saying there is not adequate parking.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
problem with that question.
Right, it's like,
Yeah.
it's very much, people are like, yes, it's so hard, and so forget it, I didn't stop. Well, if you're not willing to walk 3 spots, like we can't, no one here can help you.
So the comments will
What's your,
help.
But the
apologies, I don't know your
yeah,
business.
yeah.
I own the bookstore on Main Street.
And my parents used to own a retail drugstore in Kendall Square, so we have legions of stories about those sorts of questions.
Yeah.
Pricing and this and that. So I'm sympathetic of what you're saying, but at the same time, it's, yeah, what are those things that
But you're
deflect
asking
people
them to explain, so.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, yes,
And
do
if
we have
they
adequate parking,
explain
yes or no,
they're going
comment,
from
I'm happy to have
parking
that, I just,
spots away,
Alright,
we can draw our own conclusions.
yeah, no, I'm
on
delighted
that.
to have it, I'm just saying, I don't know if I need to dig into too much
If they say they have a park a
more.
mile away, then you can draw your conclusion on that.
Yeah.
I think that the next several questions were sort of designed to qualify that question. Does it adequate parking?
Yep.
And then there's an educational point. Reading has, I called it 1,300 town-owned, and that's not correct. It should be public parking spaces. I don't know, I thought I corrected that, but I don't know. Now I'm concerned I didn't have my saved
do we
version.
need that
You
though?
have it again later, and you said
You have
15.
it a couple places.
And again, I don't think the question is that enough, because the average civilian is in no position to comment on whether, it's like, I would just love to know, did you know that Reading has 1,500
Yeah, that's sort
public?
of the point.
That's all. Not, is that enough? No civilian can
Mhm.
comment on, is that enough, unless
enough,
they've read
yeah.
all the data here on like the parking usage.
And even with that, you don't
And
know.
even with that. Doesn't matter if they
Well,
think it's enough.
But it's a little vague, it's not telling you where it is.
Yeah.
You know, I
I
mean,
think part of
it's,
this goal is if you
Well,
change the regulations, does it open up the supply and show you have enough?
right.
If you told me we had 1,300 town-owned parking spots, I'd be like, yeah, that's more than enough, but in actuality, in certain spots, it is definitely
Is that
impacted.
a correct number? I didn't have the number, but I was drawing
It's
it
pretty
from memory.
close. I
And
can
then,
pull up the
there's like another
survey.
2,000 something private spaces.
Public parking 1331.
1331, I was
We
there.
did our own count, which might be a little different. So,
But if we said approximately,
Maybe just greater than 1,000 or something, that's kind of a shocking number.
But I guess why is that in the survey?
Right, do we
Is it
need to
just
even ask? I mean-
information? I really want us to try and shorten it a little bit, and
Yeah.
we can give them all kinds of information in the
no,
meetings here.
if they say no, it's not there's never adequate parking. Did you know there's 1,300? No.
But
Did
that
you
still
know
doesn't mean
1,300?
there's adequate
I mean, it's
parking
useful.
for them right now.
It's more just yeah, I think one of the goals that we were trying to do is educate the public, and I thought this would be a way of educating a little bit. But
Yeah, I think that might be an
Yeah, let's
after,
just-
I think it's after
Yeah.
the survey.
Just need
Yeah.
data.
Because to Chris's point, like, let's keep the survey as tight and short as possible so that we get, increase our people's likelihood to answer.
So nix the 1,300 spaces.
So-
How often do you take finding?
Oh, how long
park-
do you take?
Yes.
Not how often, how long?
How long does it take you?
Is there a question that says where they're going? And I apologize, I can't see the survey in front of me. Like where they were trying to go? Because
A
if
couple,
they say
a
they
couple
don't,
down, it says what you're going for. Yeah, we're almost at that.
How long do you?
okay, sorry.
How long do you?
How long
Is that
does
block
it take?
spaces or is it based on type of business?
How long does it take you
Does
Type of activity.
to find parking?
how long does it take?
You
Block
to find.
or looks, part of downtown might be important to know because there could be someone in one part of downtown or people in one part that think that, yeah, there's always adequate parking, and then another part that they don't think there is. So we might be able to locate if there are any problem spots, where those problem spots are.
If I had to guess, it's in the middle. Everyone's gonna be fine in the middle, and it just pushes it to the outers. But that's just
Next
a,
question
Okay.
just needs to be a yes, no.
until postmark comes in, and that might change everything anyways.
Yeah, so, so how long how long does it take you to find parking? And I asked them to just please be accurate, because some people will say it takes me forever. But here's,
Well,
I think you
give
can
them
leave it off
options.
because you didn't give forever as an option.
Yeah, you're giving them options.
and then do you typically find parking close to your destination? Yes or no? If you cannot find parking close to your destination, how long do you walk?
Are you willing to
I
walk?
don't,
Really
that-
challenging questions,
I don't
because
think
people
we-
really overestimate the amount of time that they overestimate the amount of time that they're both looking for parking and that they're walking. And they underestimate the amount of time it takes to drive somewhere.
There's no, I cannot imagine someone driving around Reading for more than 15 minutes looking for parking.
Even I haven't done it. so.
But they might,
mean,
they might
like-
say they do, but.
Right, no, that's exactly what I was thinking. They may say they do,
right.
but like, if you actually timed people, how do you even do that? Like,
Well, maybe people. will
I
just-
think you're looking for, if it skews it to 80%, say less than 5 minutes, then you know that.
And I asked them to please be accurate. I mean, I think there's some studies done on social media thing that if you ask people to be accurate and is this a truthful statement, they actually think, they pause a little bit and give a better answer.
Yeah, I actually enjoy your parenthetical, please be accurate. I applaud that.
I enjoy your use of parenthetical.
They don't drive around Reading, what they do is they double park out CVS and wait for somebody to move after them. But some people may wait 15 minutes.
That
for
could
them.
be.
yeah, okay.
They're not
I
driving.
would bet that.
I could concur, some people
I've done that.
would wait. Would they drive? No, but they
They might
may be
wait,
waiting.
yeah.
As long as that's how long do you take finding
Yeah.
parking, so we
Yeah.
didn't say how.
No, yeah, I'm
And it's only 4.
It's only 4 choices, let's see how many people lie and say greater than 15, we will judge them. And similarly, I like
Parenthetical,
see,
most people, you like that too?
yes, I love the most people can walk a quarter, because then that also makes people be like, oh,
Did I walk a quarter of a mile?
right,
No,
how
I
far
didn't.
do I think that, no, I actually like that a lot.
I was
When-
thinking that was the one you could say, once you find parking, do you often walk more downtown? Maybe, is that not what you're looking for, there you want?
Trying to find out how long.
Yeah, if you
people are
cannot
willing
find
to
it at your
walk for.
destination, that's what,
Right, or maybe to make it more clear is if you cannot find parking right at your destination,
Okay.
does that help clarify what we're getting at there?
Yes,
Right.
okay,
or at,
how front of that.
Either right at your destination or exactly at your destination?
you cannot
I like
find parking.
Close to your
Right.
destination.
No, because the close is the subjective
Right,
thing.
yeah.
We've already just said, do you find it close?
So it's right, so parking right at your destination?
Yeah, let's
You
do
gotta
that.
find it right at your
I
destination?
think in front of is a nice, someone had said that.
In front of?
Visual.
Okay, that's a good idea.
But then CVS is not really in front of, you got the back.
Well, it's still a door, it's still an
Yeah.
entrance. I think that's clear.
Right at seems okay too, because in front of it,
Feels
it's
too
a little
specific.
bit too specific.
Okay, so right at,
Like right at, for me, right at would be across Main Street, just walk across the street. To me, that's right at. If I was,
But see, to me, across the street would be right at. So what do? I put under 3 minutes. But under 3 minutes would also be 2 blocks down, which some people, right, would be, to me, that would still be right at.
but I mean, this is a little bit of that
Right.
subtle
Yeah.
education right here. You couldn't find it right, oh, did you have to walk almost 3 minutes? We're so sorry. Yeah, I love this question.
Do you think 10 years from now, people are gonna be criticizing us for these questions that we just
course
came
they
up
will.
with?
Yep, that's all right.
No one's
But
gonna
we'll be
remember
right.
these on September 20th.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, but they're gonna have they're gonna
They
have
will,
attachments and then they'll be
yes.
like, look at this.
You wanna get it at them then, and then, the data.
All right, so right
and the
at,
next question was,
Don't you like how I said 10 years from now?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do.
That gave us that
nice cushion.
buffer.
Yeah.
when performing your activities above, please let us know more about your trip. I do not need to carry anything. I have to carry an item such that I need to have my vehicle close to my
Well, I
stop.
think this is too variable, 'cause who
I think
knows?
this should be
Yeah.
tailored more to with what Carolyn said about doctor's appointments and the elderly people having to walk kind of thing. Maybe something tailored to that. I don't know if it's,
Handicapped
yes,
or less
like,
able,
yeah.
less able.
yeah, because where she mentioned a
Yeah,
majority
it
of
could be
her
more
people
generic.
can't walk. because not fault of their own. So maybe somehow that gets tweaked into this. Cause I don't need to carry anything. To
I
me,
don't
it
know what
seems,
this has to do with, I
yeah,
know
it
that
doesn't.
I'm not sure what this, I will say, like in my, we frequently have the conversation, would you like a bag with a handle because you're gonna be making more than one stop and you wanna carry things? Yes, that is frequently comes up. And people frequently do accept the bag with the handle because they're trotting all around, FYI.
I think
So
we
maybe
could
just skip the whole
It
thing.
would be useful,
Yeah,
it
it's
would
too-
be good, it would be
too
useful, it could be
esoteric.
more generic, like the podiatrist patients, right?
Would it, I don't know how truthful you would get or whether it's just too broad, but is a question like, is there a reason why you typically, I don't even want to say it out loud, but something like, is there a reason why you typically couldn't walk more than 3 minutes to parking? Is there that's not the right word.
Exemption?
Is there, are there
Something with an X.
there's circumstances
Does something
where
inhibit?
you're required to park immediately in front of the business.
So,
Okay.
so we're getting a disability thing or a carrying thing around or an anything?
Yeah, generic.
Cause I think a reasonable question would be, if you have a handicap placard or similar,
Yeah.
do you find there are sufficient handicap
yeah.
spaces downtown?
That's,
Otherwise,
that's a different question. That's a
no,
good.
but those are actual
That's
parking
an
spaces,
important
like
question,
that's
yes.
something we could actually look
Yes,
at and do
yeah,
something about.
yes.
But in general, if people are like, I don't like carrying my stuff,
I think the
we
idea
can't really
was
take
that
any action about that.
I'm gonna go, I have to pick up a few packages, I can't find space, I'm gonna be a long way away, whatever that definition is, so I'm not gonna shop here, I'm gonna go somewhere else, that would be the idea. I thought that was,
I think it comes if we're asking 8 different questions, we should probably skip the question. If we all
Yeah.
have these opinions on a question.
Although I do think somewhere in here that
Yeah.
the availability of handicap parking,
Yeah, that's a good question.
whether that's what, I have no idea, right?
Isn't there only one in front of CVS? In that area, for that area?
So
Or is it?
there's several behind CVS, so that's
Yes,
one
but
entrance, and then
only-
the front entrance, I think there's
I think it's
two?
one.
or
At
one.
Venetian Moon.
There's one in Venetian, there's not one closer to the,
No,
So there's one there.
somebody wanted one closer to CVS, because in my opinion, it would make more sense, because in theory, elderly people are going into CVS as opposed to Venetian Moon. It would make more sense, but there's probably some rhyme or reason why it has to be where it is. But I'm just getting at the one parking spot in front of CVS. I'm sure there's some regulation, like what does it have to be, 1 to 15, or like what is the?
I have no doubt we meet the
Yeah.
regulations.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
And we should also be careful about not assuming that handicap spaces are related to age. There are a lot of different
Yeah,
kinds of
just,
disabilities
I mean,
and
there's a-
maybe a lot of handicapped people are
Yeah.
throwing back the martinis.
Yes. We'll go with that route.
I don't even know that we should be using the term handicapped, people with disabilities.
oh, it's a handicap
Less
parking
able,
permit.
differently abled, differently abled.
Isn't it called a handicap parking permit?
I don't know.
It is,
I
right,
mean,
that's
you-
where,
you-
but I
you can
think
ask
it's
the question,
still
But fair
with
enough.
You have a
disabilities, so
handicap
use
parking
handicap
permit, are
parking
you
spot.
always able to
There we
find a
go.
handicap space?
Okay.
If you wanna ask it.
So we're gonna, when performing your activities, please let us know about your trip. If you carry
Nix
anything,
that one,
we
I
need to
think,
nix
right.
that one.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to interject if I could, it might seem late, but I haven't done a lot of surveys, and Andrew, maybe you can chime in, or John, done surveys, but we've got about, if I read this correctly, about 4 more pages to do. Personally, I think surveys like this one here, which is the 2020 Downtown Business Parking Survey, and I can see it done on 2 sides, but I think this is the type of survey we wanna come out of, with a 1-page survey. Anything beyond 1 page, if we're gonna try to push this at the town fair, I think people aren't gonna stop, they're not gonna take, in my opinion.
No, you're
Just a
100%, we were
Yeah.
exactly
Just
saying
in my
that, we wanted to be
opinion. I
concise for just that
think
reason.
we've got a lot of information, and God bless, I really appreciate putting it together and challenging us. But I'd be questioning what the norm is for surveys. I think the shorter, the briefer, the better. in trying to be more to the point.
Yep.
But
I do
that's
like-
just my opinion, and we can continue on.
No, I like this as well. I'm more apt, my own self.
Well, they got, if I counted them, they got about 22 questions on here. They're short and brief, but
I think with his though, it's kind of skewed because his are
Yeah,
going,
just-
you know, this way and it could have
Yeah,
been across
I mean,
and
I'm
now
sure
we
some
have.
of
It's not
this-
formatted yet.
some
Yeah, it's-
graphic people
it's
can
just a rough
condense a
draft.
lot of this, but
I mean, I
But
think that-
you're right, that's exactly why we're saying, you know what, let's cut some of these as we
Yeah.
go so that we
I
can
think
make
a
it
lot of them
concise.
are repetitive, but I mean,
Yeah.
we'll take the information we can get, but that's just a.
Yeah, I think we all agree with you.
So let's, next.
So I need the parking down there ready for, and I think this would be better in like a table, I thought. Like if you say, I need to park in downtown Reading for, and then have
Check all the.
rows here and then frequency across the top.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So
see,
in
yeah,
other
yeah.
words, church. Well, I don't do that, maybe I do that daily, but mostly probably I do that, I'll check church weekly, you know, commuting to work every day, that sort of thing.
I was thinking, because I think that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because that means someone's gonna have to think
Yeah.
through like,
That
how many
doesn't fit on
things.
the paper.
Yeah, I was
Good luck.
thinking that if you just say, I often park in downtown Reading for, and, you know, check marks, like, oh, yep, I do chores, I eat out there, I don't work there, I, don't go to church downtown. So you could easily just check, like, these are the ones that I often do, and keep moving.
And Jay, this is the part where we're talking about the uses, like the use case, when you were saying, do we have something about why they're coming downtown?
Yeah.
I do think getting that additional information, Bernie,
It would
on
be
like
huge.
how
I mean, I think,
often,
to me, it's
but-
probably the most important question on the whole, it's probably the most important set of questions on the whole survey. Because at least you get, and trying to get it concisely and,
It's
could
the
be really
frequency.
helpful. Because there are a lot of people who use it, that's exactly this is exactly creating the demand equation, right? Because it says, I go down every day to commute to work on the commuter rail, and 3 times a week I do this and that and the other thing. Because once you can, I mean, really it's you're just trying to create the demand function, then you can sort of match up the supply more easily.
But my concern with that is that we rely too much on what people say, right? This is a skewed bias stuff, right? And so the frequency, I don't know. I don't know how much I'd want to rely on that versus what we actually have seen for parking demand at commuter rail station. Or, what the projections are for that and that sort of thing, then
And
I mean, if you
frequency
have-
changes.
if you have
I mean,
like-
it's,
if you have
in
like-
commuter, you have to assume it's every day, and you should make that assumption that it's every day. Just because
It-
you need to.
Right.
And hair, I go every 6 weeks, so I don't think I'd even check anything off if I'm going to the hair, cause there wouldn't, like, there's only so much information
Wouldn't you say
you get.
monthly or quarterly, something like that?
But now you're breaking
think-
it down
Yeah.
really
I
deep
think
that I
that
think is.
this question is its own entire survey within itself. And I'm not sure that we can take it out or do something separate as well, because now you just,
I mean,
but it just seems like it is important, but it's like this whole growing question out of it. It just seems not overly complicated. It just seems, like I said, it's making its own question within itself. It is super important, but how do we condense what's there when we're asking for so much pertinent information? It's hard for me to, it just seems as if it's its own survey from its own question, and I don't know if we can actually just do that.
I mean, I think I don't know, I don't see why, I'm not so intimidated by the.
I'd have to see
I
the
mean,
layout.
I would just say like,
guess.
it's just a little table, it could be like, this big in a thing, and people can just kind of, boom, 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 done, next question.
For doing it online, I understand. For me, I'd be able to, yes, that seems reasonable. But if we're printing stuff out, or once again, you're seeing something and now you're on page 4, who wants to answer a 4-page kind of survey? So that's my gripe with it. It's such a good question, but
So I guess, are people concerned with the cross-referencing of what you're doing and how often? Like, would people feel happier if we kept this separate, like, just in general, how often do you visit downtown?
But did we ask
The problem
that?
is I go every day, and then the problem,
I mean,
the reason
I
I think I structured it this way, I thought about, first I said, well, let's just put it down as 2 questions.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, well, that suffers from all the problems that all the other survey
Yeah,
questions
no, I mean,
saw had.
I like the matrix idea, and I don't feel like it's overly onerous to just check off.
You have 15, so you could do 3 columns of 5, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's literally just like, they have the list of the things, and then, daily, weekly, quarterly, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Which,
Oh.
I don't
I
think
guess
that's
I'd have to
too hard.
see it in,
Just line it out and.
I'd have to see it
just
in
like-
print form, and maybe it's a final question or somewhere where it's,
I guess I don't understand the importance of if somebody visits quarterly, how is that feeding, how is that data
That's too
feeding
much
into our scope of trying to figure out parking? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's great information and it would be great
Yeah,
data,
quarterly may
but I
not, maybe the
don't-
free,
Well-
maybe the free, but the.
Quarterly means you, like, that's sort of irrelevant.
Right, like you don't come enough that we have to worry about
Right, so we don't have
you.
to worry about that.
Yeah.
So if it's the daily and the
You
could- that was-
employees.
maybe it's a digital only question and not a thing, or like.
But if
we're
it's
not
just check
not
boxes,
doing
why
it.
is that hard on a piece of
It's
paper?
more of, I'm just trying to get the formatting down. If it's at the end and you hit people with quick ones in the beginning, and then you have it here at the end, but I
mean,
guess I have to see how many
Could
we
take
end
the,
up
it
with.
could take
I
the
can
place of a
see
lot of other
that if
questions up
it's
top.
right, and what I was reacting to was how many times a week, right? 3 times, 4 times here, and but if it's check marks of daily, weekly,
Yeah.
monthly.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't get into like 3 times, like
Yeah.
that's like,
Right.
plus I think we can also consolidate like service provider, like we don't need 3 different.
Yeah, I didn't want,
Probably.
I wanted to, I was trying to be respectful for the various businesses, and I know there's been, like, a lot of people say, we don't need any doctors and dentists downtown.
No, it's not that we don't. But
I mean,
but yeah, we could just, I think service provider,
That
for
seemed to be
example.
that seemed to be a big issue with parking.
Yep.
But I
Um,
think we have the downtown business parking survey that we should use this data for the businesses. And this should be focused on the people that are at the fair and the residents,
The users, yeah.
the users, like, because I think we have employee data from this, correct? Yeah, yes. And I think,
Well, I think we're trying to do a holistic one that's for both residents and business, for just like, how often are you showing up downtown? Yeah, I don't know.
Well-
But this is what you were saying, we wanna separate out.
I feel like we should. And not that we're not gonna discuss the business section of it, the employee section of it, but if I only come down here once a week, my parking problem is the same whether I come once a week or daily. If I can't find a space once a week, I may not find a space, if I get the same time every day. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know
Yeah,
what we're gonna
but
get
that's
out
one,
of
that's
that.
one of the, what's one of the items there is to go to work. I go downtown to go to work, daily. You know, so that person would just say, I work downtown, I check it off, you capture that.
And that's the only place that we're gonna have in the survey that the person's that works downtown?
No, I probably,
I'm
we have
just
other
asking.
questions about that, but yeah,
Okay.
that would clearly be a quick and dirty way to, a quick and easy way to get that information. So if enough people surveyed with this, I mean, I just was throwing
But
this
it-
stuff down.
No,
you know, I was
I
just
think
throwing
there's
it
a
up
lot
on
of
the
good
paper
information,
just to
but
see
I think
what
an
stuck.
employee who parks downtown is a different parking issue than a customer going to CVS. They're 2 different problems.
But they're all on this little chart.
I think if we refine the chart to, like dining or recreation service provider, like if we condense
Yeah,
it
cut it
and
down
just
a little
Yeah, condense it
Yeah.
and do the check off of daily, weekly, monthly.
So maybe, yeah,
And-
maybe daily, weekly, monthly, or never. You gotta put never, because.
No, because you
If
don't
you
have to
just
check
don't check
off.
it off,
You
then
just
that's
don't check it
never.
off.
Right, if I don't
Right.
check off
Sure.
accountant,
Then I never
Then
go
I
to the
don't go.
accountant.
right, or if I don't check off church, I don't go.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because I think, right, that would, if we, right, like eat out or take out.
Yeah, well, one requires 2 hours of parking, one requires 15
Right, no,
minutes.
those are good to have
Yeah.
separate, I think,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
That's why dining in or dining out or.
Yeah, other leisure, to go to work.
This seems
Then
like
it's
this
a
has,
question,
it has to be refined.
am I going down to my accountant or my insurance guy? I don't know, my insurance person. I don't know what the, I'm looking more for input from the, like arts, entertainment and fitness. That was one of, some of these categories were on one of the prior surveys. That's kind of why I put
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I found that particular survey really good. So that's why I put all this stuff in here. And it also, on one of the surveys, these categories matched up with one of the business surveys. So I felt like,
Yeah, then we could see some
You-
trends.
yeah, you could say, okay, here's what the businesses are saying and here's what the customers are saying. So, like town business, I mean, this parking lot, a lot of people talk about this parking lot is empty on certain, like Fridays or weekends or whatever, so. But town business, if you're here on town business every day, well, maybe you do weekdays, weekends, I mean, do we have to worry about that? Night,
Well,
day, night?
Aren't the restrictions only Monday through Friday?
No, I'm just saying, I was just thinking out loud.
There's a
We probably
definite-
don't need quarterly or never, but should we put day, night?
You definitely need it because there is a massive difference between day and night parking here.
Yeah, I mean,
Certain areas are complete ghost towns. And
Yeah.
some
And certain areas are completely packed.
yeah, because if you had that, you'd be able to create your demand function a little bit more precisely. So you'd say, I come down daily, to do to take the commuter to work all day. And that's a daily day, not night or something.
Yeah, that's where I think that's a little.
complicated.
Yeah, that gets a little too, I think we're asking too much on that. It's
If you could get,
crucial, I mean,
if you
it
could get
would
just
be
that
great data.
information and nothing, I mean, if you could just get that information and nothing else, you'd go a long way to forecasting the demand equation. Then you could match it up with the supply problem. And then you could do the dynamics of day, night. You know what I mean?
all based off of the survey.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not saying, I've got a whole lot of, I mean, there's a lot of other
Yeah,
data.
that's why I think that the,
It's like
some of the
what
other
can-
information is just as good, because I, as you can tell, right, I think this will be important information, but it's not, I wouldn't rely on it as much as some of the actual ground truth
Yeah.
data.
But again, we're being charged with trying to get broader information from the more people.
Well, we're being charged to get more input,
Input, we don't necessarily
that-
need to rely on
On
data
this.
from,
right, so it's like what data is best gathered from this, and then what data is best gleaned from some of the other information that
Yes.
we have. So what can we most effectively gather from a survey? I see your point, yeah.
So we'll try to reformat this a little bit so that it's more.
Yeah, so I think the grid sounds
more
great, but I think
intuitive
getting
to
the day-night
people.
thing might be just a bridge
just a
too
little bit
far
too much,
for
yeah.
this.
People do not realize, yeah, so this is another thing many people don't realize, I think I'm
Yeah, get rid of this
repeating-
whole,
That out.
Yeah.
we don't need to talk about private parking because we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about residential developments, we can't do anything about it.
I'm not sure I would totally flush that out.
We can't do anything about it.
This
Please
is not our.
provide-
What is your estimate of the number of
That's not
spaces
right.
needed per living
Future
unit
parking.
limit? Who cares what their estimate is? We can't do anything about it. We have a requirement and it's not part of this committee we can't change the requirement. We can't even make a recommendation about the requirement. Nobody wants to know what this committee thinks about that.
Wouldn't it be fun to see what they write? I'm kidding.
Yeah, I think that would be a zoning question, and then we needed data on that, we would get hard data from consultants or developers or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind, okay.
I guess when we get through this, we'll count up the amount of questions we have. You say it's 27, we're like, sounds like a good number to me. Or, then we can maybe trim some off or add some based on how many we end up with.
So is downtown Reading accessible to you? Is that sort of a repeat? I mean, would we get the same information of, does Reading have adequate parking to meet my needs?
Seems redundant, yeah.
Yeah.
So which,
Is downtown
Question
Reading
on?
accessible to you? Is that what you're?
Yeah,
Question.
yeah.
Again, that was another question that came from, I think, the Reimagine Reading survey. I was just bringing it in here to try to give credit for what people had, and they have responses then. I didn't know if it was useful to.
I wonder if
Have
that's
time
where we
series
put
data.
the handicapped or disabled kind of question, that's what that
I think
kind
that's a
of means
different,
to
I
me?
mean, we have another, I put another question in there. Do you have a handicap permit? Can you always find a space?
You do have that in there?
I inserted it when we
Okay.
were,
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
when people asked about that earlier.
Yep.
I mean, I wasn't quite sure what that question,
Yeah, well, and remember,
was designed
Reimagine
to
Reading
do.
was about much more than
Yeah.
parking, so I don't think we need to replicate.
Right.
I think you've covered it when you already asked, that Reading has adequate parking for my needs.
Do parking
I don't think we need to know about
outside downtown.
activities outside of Reading either.
oops, due to parking.
I don't think that's
Not-
really
I don't think
Do
relevant.
you
that's relevant
perform
for
your
what we're
visits outside of Reading downtown? In other words, I don't go downtown, I go somewhere else because I can't go to Reading. That was one of the.
Yeah.
I think
we
that's a
can-
relatively important question, no?
Not for parking.
Because I know like, I'm never having an issue parking at Home Depot or Staples or anywhere over there like ever.
Right.
And I know that going in, I might park further away at Home Depot and actually walk, but when you take that area and put it over to here, I'm not doing it. It's the whole mentality going in, I know I'm gonna find a spot at Home Depot, I'm not gonna have an issue with this.
Well, that's
But I
exactly the
would
point of the question, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about going to Professor's Market. I do a drive-by, can't find anything, go where there's free parking, where there's adequate parking. That's the idea of the question. I would think that from a parking point of view, that's an important question. I don't have a
I
business
think it has to
down
be,
here.
if
I had a
anything, it
business-
has to be reworded, because
Uh-huh.
once you start reading it seems awkward.
This is part of like what Jay was getting at earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the same sort of question.
Oh, so it's due, D-U-E,
Due to
not
park,
D.
yeah, it's not,
Oh, yeah.
the spelling should be D-U-E, due to
Oh, all
parking,
right, so
not,
that makes it a
due.
little bit better, yes.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, if the answer is yes, so what does that mean for our project? And if the answer is no, what does it mean for our project?
Should
Other
we-
than
should we
giving us
just have like a
something to information, I mean, I'm open to.
Should we have a comment line? Why, or
Yeah,
comment, I mean, we did comment on the one above it.
Well, I mean, if I have a doctor in Stoneham or a dentist in Stoneham and I have a dentist here, I go there because I have a dentist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
you
I
know,
think that
for
it's-
those kind of appointments, you're gonna be here and you're gonna take up a
But you're
parking
asking me,
space.
where do I go to the activities outside of Reading? So I go to Stoneham. Do you know what I mean? So I
Right,
think
now that we know
it's-
that, what do we do with that information?
It doesn't,
Nothing.
it doesn't impact parking here at all, or my ability to park here. I don't go there. Do you know what I mean? So I think the question's vague and I don't really
It's the-
think
Yeah, it's the discretionary, the discretionary visitor. If they can't find something, if they can't find parking, I mean, I typically find parking anywhere, it's not a big deal to me, but for some people, it's like your question, will people drive 10 miles to save a penny on the gas? Yes, they do, all the time. Why? That's their choice. I'm not saying it's the right choice. It's the right cost benefit analysis. It's feedback for the businesses.
Do we wanna
I guess,
say,
right, we need to be focused not on getting information for businesses, because that's not what we're doing here, right? What we're doing is trying to make sure that the people that want to park in Reading are able to do that. So, like you said, there's many people that I think are going to go and frequent other businesses because of a perception or a reality that they can't find parking here.
Actually, this is the question.
We're only going to have so much parking, right? This is never going to be a strip mall where there's parking for forever. So we are right. Downtown Reading businesses are going to have whatever that term is. Like the spillover. People just aren't going to come because they're in downtown. There's nothing we're ever going to be able to do about that because that's a downtown. So I guess I think that we need to make sure that we're really focusing this less on the business perspective and more on the, we have a finite resource and how do we manage that, not how do we help businesses
And
understand.
to Tom's point, we want to keep this as concise as possible, so let's
Yeah.
make sure we're doing actionable questions, that it's data that is worthwhile to us.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I forgot to point out that there's the next question or two is paired with that. So do you perform your duty, due to parking, do you perform your visits outside Reading or outside downtown Reading? Where do you go to do the activities outside that you cannot do?
Right, I think we all saw that, and we're saying it doesn't matter if they go to Wakefield, like it doesn't impact what we're doing here. Knowing that does not help us.
Yeah.
I think the chart we have on the page previously that talks about what they're doing in Reading is more important.
That's the important
than this.
I'd be more apt to skip this as well in favor of other questions.
I think the next good one is when you say in the next 6 months, how confident will you return to in-person shopping downtown, right? Isn't that kind of?
That's a good one because that gears more, if you get like 85% of the people, now you're gonna have an influx in parking is gonna be more of an issue. If someone says in the next 6 months, I'm never coming downtown, then there's not gonna be a parking issue. If 85% of the people aren't coming downtown ever again, so I do like that question.
Oh, there was the one above it too. When I park in downtown Reading, I am alone with one person with children, other.
I don't think that matters, it's still one car. You can have 5 people in the car and it doesn't change how many spaces they need.
Right, but it might influence how willing they are to park away or not.
I don't think we'd ever
I don't-
get the answer without actually talking to them why they did it in the first place. And that's more of an expanded upon question.
And I think we should really keep in mind some of the surveys that were done in 2019 and before and all the data that they collected before, because that, like I got my oil bill and they're basing it on before 2019. So I think we can go back in time and have a really accurate measure of what the parking situation will be based on what we think is gonna be 6 months from now. Because we don't know what's gonna be 6 months from now, but we really need to base it on what we do know, and what we do know has already passed. So I think that we kind of need to keep that in the back of our minds, what it was like 2 or 3 years ago when commuters were parking all the way up my street, whereas they're not now, and they may not in 6 months, but they're gonna come back. Do you know what I mean? So I think that this is all great, but we need to keep that in mind as well.
And I think the other thing is we keep encouraging people to come to meetings and to try to create public opportunities for comment. So I think it's not that nobody wants any of this anecdotal or more subjective information. It's just that this might not be where we get it. The survey might not be. It's like, hey, people, if you have family, come in and tell us about what it's like going downtown with a bunch of kids. That's a better conversation than a survey question.
Yeah, but a survey is a far broader catchment. I mean, if 2 people come in and say, I do whatever, but
If somebody just checks off and says, I come down with children, what are you gonna do with that information?
well, I mean, it would presumably say if you want to push those people out to the outer core for whatever, but I mean, I don't know how you would do it, but that might discourage them from being able to park downtown, right? Would you want to lug 3 kids or?
I think, so first of all, when we get into the whole inner court, outer court, the whole proposal of that was to move employee parking to the outer court. Nobody ever proposed moving
I don't even know anything about that.
Right, so I'm
just
saying,
try-
don't worry
I'm
about
just
the
trying to
outer core
design a-
proposal, it's not
I'm
even
just trying to
germane.
design I'm thinking about people I know who live in Reading, who come into town, and sometimes they have 2 or 3 kids in car seats.
Yep, I have that
And,
all day, every day at my
I
store.
mean, I have relatives who do that, right? So I'm trying to, give them an opportunity to provide input into the.
But I
into the-
think that input would be much better in person. I would much rather hear from.
If you're only gonna
like
get,
Dave Talbot
how many
to
people
talk
are gonna,
or-
how many people tonight are gonna tell you that?
Well, I think that,
Nothing
right,
having a
I
survey
think
question
that
doesn't hurt.
going back to the beginning, right, of Reading has parking, adequate parking for my needs, yes or no, comment, right, is if someone's driving reason for not coming to downtown Reading because they're, lugging 3 kids out of parking seats and and then there's no place for their stroller, right, while they're hauling kids out of the car and all that, right, that hopefully, right, if that's the real driving reason why they don't come down to downtown Reading, you would hope that they would say that, like, there's no, adequate places for, stroller parking or whatever. So I think that we can get some of that because I think the other question, right, there's a lot of inferences that you might make when people say, yes, I have kids.
No, I mean, it doesn't say kids, it just says, well, it says with children. But like the doctor who gave us, Dr. Gothier, who talked to us last
Yep.
meeting,
Yep.
said, partly the question was designed for her patients, right? She has patients that come in, there's a person who's got a foot problem and a person who's driving them because they can't drive. So this person would answer, I come with another person. Doesn't say I come with I'm not trying to I wasn't trying to design it that way. I'm just
But we
trying to
already
say
know that, like, we already know that there's a challenge down there, and so she's looking to find more more patient parking.
Yeah.
That's information we already have. We already know that people come downtown with families and strollers all day, every day, because I can tell you that, I see it all day, every day. We already know. So you don't need to fill up another survey question when.
So,
I think it's more we've spent 5 minutes questioning it, we should skip it kind of thing. Just, like I said, if we really have all these extraneous questions built upon the question, we should skip the question.
Yeah.
It seems like
Skip
the
or vote,
easiest.
I agree.
It just seems the easiest. Like I said, if you and I carpooled down there, I don't know what that would change the scenario of this question, other than you just answered a question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you need to know why Bernie and I both went downtown. And that's more of a expanded upon, like, now I get 5-minute explanation of why I just did that. And you can't just fit that in this question, so I think it's best to just.
no, I just,
It's a good question,
Usually-
but it's more, it has to be expanded upon. And I don't think people are gonna have enough space for that.
It's hard writing up a survey. I've done it a couple of times just for running community singers, and sometimes you get going and you go off on a tangent. And you can take it to the board meeting and people are like, what? It's not easy.
yeah, and then there's the questions about the 40R district and the,
So we're good on in the next 6 months question, though. That's something we wanna keep, right?
I think that's even
Yeah.
probably too short, 6 months. I mean, it probably should be 12 months because 6 months is already into January
6 to
and
12?
businesses have already
I like the
told their
6 to 12.
employees they're not gonna come back until January. I mean, a bunch of companies have already made that announcement.
Well,
Just this
that's
week.
not in Reading though. That's like, I mean,
That's
Talking
like
about the downtown.
That's like downtown Boston.
Right, but not
that's
downtown Reading.
We can just do
I know,
6 to
but
12.
that's the
and
point is
That'll
that
do it.
if the employees who live in Reading are being told, don't come to work in Boston, that has a clear impact on the demand for commuting spaces, right? Doesn't it?
yeah.
Clearly does, right?
And we're talking about shopping. This isn't about shopping.
Right, in the next
Not
6
about-
months, how confident are you?
Oh.
So what if we do
That was-
6 to
that was-
12?
Again, that was lifted from one of the prior surveys, maybe we just say,
I think everybody's on board with that.
I think we're fine with shopping, I don't think we should bring commuting
Oh,
into
yeah,
the
but
next-
when
mix.
you have
because
children
no one
and others.
knows.
Right,
No one
nobody
knows,
knows, and
it's
I
whatever
don't,
your company says, and, yeah, so. But, right, this is, to me, this is a good question, because it will help us understand how people may be gauging some of these other questions. You know, and like you said, like, how dire, how quickly are people willing to, in their mind, you know, ready to resume normal activities.
So I'd like, in the next 6 to 12
Yeah,
months,
I
how confident will you return to?
Parking. in
How
Reading.
confident are you
Parking
that you will
downtown.
return in person?
But I'm not even sure shopping is really that's probably, again, that was a question from a prior survey, which was more directed towards shopping, whereas if we're focusing on parking, we should just say, will you
Maybe in-person
return
activities
to
downtown?
parking in downtown?
I do like shopping because that seems discretionary, where parking, you know, some of those parking activities are pretty non-discretionary, right? If you're going to the doctor,
Parking, yeah,
podiatrist
so
or
we could just
whatever,
say, in the next 12 months, how often, how confident
Well, shopping
will
is the
you
key to
return
our
to
downtown's
parking in
revitalization, so-
downtown? Because that encompasses a broader,
I think you're looking
Right.
for in-person shopping and commuter.
no,
Kinda
just
in
parking.
within-
I don't think we wanna incorporate
don't-
commuting
I-
into this. It's a different,
Just parking, right?
shopping.
well, I think John's point, I think this question was getting at, in the COVID context,
Hmm.
are you getting out of your car and going in places? Are you
Absolutely.
comfortable doing it? That's what this,
Which is probably too narrow a question, because parking isn't just for shopping, right? Parking is for many different uses. Going to the orthodontist,
yes.
so if I.
Well, I would say
my
like shopping,
orthodontist
dining,
isn't-
like for in-person activities.
Like activities.
yeah.
Why does it have to be, why does it have to, is parking only for in-person activities, or is it for
Yes.
commuting as well?
We're not
We're
getting
not
into
doing
commuting
commuting.
here.
Why
This
not?
is a different question. This is
We're not.
your level of comfort because of COVID. Are you gonna be going into downtown businesses?
Make
So
that a
then, so
separate
then we should
question.
have a separate question then,
Yeah.
how confident are you?
Yeah, no, the commuting question's a fine one. It just isn't this one.
Yeah.
Did we ask it
Next one,
prior? I thought there was a commuter one. Isn't it in the table?
It's
that
in the table,
It's
but
in the
so
table,
is
yeah.
this, I mean,
Well, if this is in
The
the
whole
table,
question
then
is
why
pro-
are we doing it again? I'm
Yeah, I
sorry,
mean, this
did you
again,
say
this
it
was a
in-
more
This is a-
COVID
because this is a-
reaction one.
because
I
this is
don't,
a
I don't feel strongly
draft.
that this
Yeah.
needs to be here.
and I was trying to
But
throw
some people liked it.
a lot of questions in from a lot of prior
Yeah,
surveys.
I understand.
And we're here to decide whether we want this question in or not. It's probably too narrow a question to have in the survey period. Because it's only focused on the next 12 months, which is not what we're here to try to plan for.
All right, let's bag it.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
I think the next question is parking.
I don't think
Yeah, we don't
to
need
talk
any of
about
these
40R. I think the paid parking question,
I have an issue with the wording of that.
yeah, I think it needs to be not very specific just yet, because we really haven't had a chance to talk about it at all. And I think it kind of was introduced,
It's
but
a
there's
hu-
different
I
opinions.
think it should be a yes, no, and then comments.
All right. So
Well, here's
no.
it. Let me just show an example, like, let me read this aloud as it is, and then read aloud an alternative wording. And
Okay.
then we can talk about how question wording skews results. Paid parking is an option to regulate usage in downtown Reading. Please indicate your opinion. It makes sense. I'm against this. I pay taxes and feel my taxes, blah, blah, blah. It will diminish my view of the town. Alternatively, street parking would remain free. Would you support paid parking in lots if you could then legally park for longer periods? Right? It's a very different
I think
tone.
we need that first part.
Actually, the first part is key. If people, like the
Right.
proposal, and again, we're even ahead of ourselves because we aren't even proposing anything. But the only proposal for paid parking was always in the context of it was only lots and that street parking would always be free. So if you're willing to just drive and find a street spot, you can always park for free. But if you're like, I wanna go to lunch, I wanna get my hair done, and I don't wanna be limited to the 2-hour thing, so I'm gonna go into a lot and I'm willing to pay $4 to do that. That's a very different thing than, I pay taxes, how dare you, as a
Yeah.
question.
So would you say, you know, if street parking is free, but you would have to pay for a lot parking? I don't know, would
I
you?
think you phrased it as a yes, no. I
I
think it should be a yes, no.
Yeah.
I-
If street parking were to remain, in a hypothetical world, and that's the thing, it's like, I don't know if we even want this
I
question
don't
on
think
here.
that we want it because it's putting,
I-
there's a lot of, right, there's a lot of caveats in there.
Yeah.
Right, that I may accept it in this condition, but not in that condition, or like, we don't even know what it is we're proposing yet.
We
No,
know what we're
because-
If
proposing.
anything,
Because
right?
now I'm gonna
And
take
so,
the spot in front of Carolyn's thing because it's 2-hour parking, because now I don't wanna park at CVS because I'm gonna have to pay there instead. So now I'm taking spots away from people that are supposed to be going in and out of businesses quickly. I'm just taking their spot and screwing them. Essentially what it comes down to. If street parking was free and lot parking you have to pay for, I
no,
just
but
came
no
in
matter
that
what,
scenario that.
street parking is free, I mean,
Right,
it's
it's free
2
now.
hours.
And it's 2 hours.
Yeah. So, right, there's too many, I think there's too many nuances to even put this question out there.
I think this is, it's a very central
I think,
question
are
to the
you-
parking regulations.
I
Whether
think
you
are
wanna
you
charge for
open
parking or
to
not.
paid parking if it meant you were more apt to find a spot or something like that? I think we need to have a paid parking option on here, because if 99% of the people say, I'm against paid parking, and then we're gonna be like, well, you're paying for parking, it's like, what did you just do to me?
Right.
So think of it the other way around, don't ask a question if you don't want the answer, like, if you don't wanna limit, I mean that without, I'm entirely serious. You don't wanna limit what our options are that we can explore. So if you're saying, if too many people, of course
Why
nobody
even do a
wants
survey?
paid parking, you already know the answer to that question.
So why not ask it? What's the point?
Why ask it? Why, because you're just like, we've now gathered, and people are like, they've gathered 400 people saying they don't like paid parking. We know, everybody wants everything to be free.
Right.
I want everything to be free, right in front of the place I'm going, and somebody carry me in on a pallet of gold. Like, of course, we know you don't want to pay for parking.
But
We
if
don't wanna limit what we can explore as a committee by,
But if I knew because I paid for parking, I'd be guaranteed my parking spot, I would pay for parking.
and that's it, and
Because
some
I was
people can see
guaranteed.
that, sure. But then you have to, again, get into the nuances of how does it work and blah, 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 and
Yeah.
that's,
Right, and we're not there to
right.
We're nowhere
That's what
near
I
that.
meetings
think,
and discussions
you know,
and presentations
And then there
are
are those
for.
questions, and a perfect one that isn't on here, that shouldn't be, but could very easily be, is should the town build an additional a parking garage, right? That's a,
You can ask that all you want, but
you can ask that all that you want, but right, there are so many other questions that come along, because
there we go,
I'll
how do you
always
pay
say,
for it? Is it actually?
sure, yeah, if someone else is paying for it, right?
Right.
Or if we have a spot to put it, right, there's so many other questions that come along that need to be answered to really inform my honest yes or no question, response to that. And I think I'm sort of the same thing on the paid parking, that there's too many additional details that need to be put out there in order to get a decent yes or no from people.
So what additional details would you suggest putting in the question?
I don't think we're
I
ready.
think it's too
I don't
detailed
think
that you can't put it in a survey,
Yeah.
surveyable question.
I mean, we should have it in there, so it's just a question of how we word it.
Why-
We don't
say
agree
no.
with you, we don't think it should be in there.
I think the problem with that though is if we don't ever ask the public about paying for parking,
why-
and then we have paying for parking on the table, how did we ever get it from
I
them?
think we need to put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
And
This is
have
not the
people
only
come
way
and
we're asking the
discuss it.
public
Right.
things.
Right.
So this
So
goes
we-
back
we
to my
ask it here, and
discussion
then we
before
also-
is, right, we're in the data gathering
Right.
phase right now, right? This is a time where we're getting that information, we're gonna put, we're outreaching to people to get understanding of parking issues. We then have to, right after we get these recommendations, that we're gonna come up and push those out and get feedback on that. That's when, right, with paid parking, right, there's a give and take, all those things, and a discussion, right, that goes along with it, and that's when we get those, I think we get.
I realize what the most important thing is that's not on this survey that we need. Would you be willing to participate in further discussions about this? Please provide your email and or phone number to be informed of future meetings where we can have these discussions.
Yeah, that was also one of the questions on the various surveys, and a lot of people provided that. But as far as the paid parking question, I mean, I think, I don't see, there's a philosophy that says we're here to gather input from the community. And one of the most controversial subjects that came up in the proposed parking regulations was paid parking. And so why shouldn't you ask that question?
But this is not the only data gathering option
you have to ask that question. You can't ignore
We ask that question in a forum where we can also present the data of here's what paid parking does in other communities, here's what this looks like, here's all the context. There's so much context around this question, and here's how it would work and why we would do it.
Or why we wouldn't do
Or
it.
why we wouldn't do it, right? This is just a loaded.
But there's no reason look, you can't say.
I'll say,
we'll
if
ignore
you
a
ask the
simple-
question, I'm gonna ignore any response that comes into it, because there's no context. Like, to me, it's a meaningless question. If you put
Can we vote on it?
Well, but you're saying that you don't want to ask the question because you don't want to hear the answer, but we're willing to hear the answer if people just come into the room.
We're willing to hear
and
the
tell
answer.
us. But then you'll,
Because
but
there's
then you'll have
context,
a
because
very.
there's a
context.
discussion.
We're willing to hear the answer once we're presented with all of the material. Like, this is just a huge topic that we cannot possibly ask a question in a survey and expect to get a legitimate answer from residents and have us know what to do with it. There's so much information based on all of it that one question on a survey won't do it justice. And I
It
think
won't do it
that
justice, but it gives you some
it
gives you some feedback that if you then propose something that nobody likes, what are the consequences? If you don't ask the question,
But we're asking
never
them a
gonna
question,
get
we're not
an
giving
answer.
them the opportunity to discuss it with us and tell us why they don't want it. Or us saying to them, it's free for half an hour and then you pay, whatever the other options are. It's such a loaded topic that we can't, none of the answers will be valid for anything. If I was asked the question and I'd be like, of course I don't wanna pay for parking, and then it raises all these, and then you've got the town talking to everybody, oh my God, they're gonna charge us parking, blah, blah, blah. You have to be so careful with what you're asking. It's just not the right time to ask it or the right venue. We need to ask it when we're prepared to answer questions that are gonna be asked upon us, because someone's gonna show up at the next meeting and say, you're gonna have paid parking, and we're gonna have no idea what to say.
I heard there are
to
gonna be meters on every spot in
Right.
town. That's the.
And for us to have the question on the survey and then have somebody come to a public comment and us say, well, we're not ready to talk about it yet, I'd be really pissed. Because we are not doing our due diligence before we're asking the question. A lot of this other stuff, we're very informed on just from reading the materials and living here, but the parking issue and the pay part of it is very heated, and I do not think we're doing it justice by putting it on this survey.
I think that's a higher level, much higher level than this group, right?
No, we
it
might
is
make
definitely
that
us,
recommendation, but.
But we need a lot more, I'm not comfortable with it being on here at all. I just think, because I'm not informed enough to be able to say to anybody that asks me a question outside of this room, what are they talking about the parking? And I could tell them what I know from Julie's reports from before, but that's still third person me regurgitating something from 2 years ago. So we would not do it justice, and people's responses would not be, I don't think that they'd be well thought out or legitimate, because we're not really, how do they know if it makes sense? We haven't explained to them what it would mean. Or not sure, or I'll go elsewhere if there's parking, if you pay for parking. I don't think it's a good idea to put it on this survey.
I think for this one, it seems as if more people don't want it on there, and I'd be more apt to just go with that then. As much as I would kind of want a form of the question on there, I understand that most people are gonna say, I don't wanna pay for parking, so this is a pointless question, but what if we got it back and it was 60-40 kind of split, then you'd be like, wow, pretty shocking to me. I never would have expected it, and be like, well, you didn't ask the question now, like, because you're assuming that it's gonna come back, 95% of the people say, I don't wanna pay for parking. But I understand what you're saying, that you're now loading it up where all of a sudden 9 people are making paid parking all over the place. Because it seems like it's an option on the table, when it is an option on the table, I see what you're saying, it's more of, it seems as
Well,
if.
we're asking about, like, what is your opinion of a thing we might do? We're not asking,
Yeah.
what is your opinion of changing a 2-hour zone to a 4-hour zone? What is your opinion of the inner core?
in there too.
No, but it's too soon for that. This is the sort of like, how, right now we're gathering the, what do you do, what do you need, what do you know, like what, how do you wanna park downtown? We're not getting into asking residents, are you in favor of the 30-minute spot here and a 2-hour spot there? Like, there's no context. This isn't the place to have that level of detail. And this is just another one of those things that, like, when you think of these really specific parameters around what the paid parking proposal was initially, there is so much context there. You'd have to write like 2 paragraphs. Otherwise just be like, you know?
Which is what made it so confusing.
It's probably best we skip it and move on then.
Yeah, in this-
It's the consensus.
The only way I can think to word that would be to say, would you be willing to pay for parking if you were guaranteed a spot? But I don't know if that would be useful.
But that's not even on the table. How do you guarantee a
Yeah,
spot?
how do you guarantee a spot for anything?
That's like the leasing program
That's a
that they already
leasing
got rid
program.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can't go back to the leasing program.
If you'd
You
be in
can
favor,
guarantee a
go back
spot if
into.
you change the pricing based on the occupancy.
Yeah, again, these are detailed, this is a whole nuance thing. It's just not an answerable thing. on the
That's
survey.
fine, I agree,
Over
I agree, I don't think it makes sense, the question.
I think the parking, paid parking, and the other word that was brought up here, and I've heard it when I've gone around to the people downtown, and that is, as was mentioned here, the word garage. And I think those are 2 hot button issues that we're better off leaving off. And we're gathering, as it's already been said, gather the information, work on it, and address those 2 issues later on down the road. We ignore them, right now, we're not addressing them, but I think it's something we may have to address as a committee later on down the road.
Of course.
But we will hopefully do our homework and be prepared to address it. But those 2 words, I don't think should appear on this survey, in my opinion.
Right, all the rest of this is about demand, right, and usage, right? And to me, that's fine, that's appropriate, right? We're asking people what they currently do, right? So, not their opinions on regulations.
I'm
Or future
fine
reasons.
with skipping it, like I said, I think
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
somewhat.
for the record, I think it's important to have that, and probably, maybe some of the other issues wouldn't be a bad idea. Because that was also another issue that came up in the surveys and the responses was 2 and 4 hour parking. I mean, I think that, there were some comments about that as well.
And those are huge, we will talk about them.
Yeah, those
It's
are things for
just-
us to work on, but they're not a
But we shouldn't
survey
talk-
question.
We shouldn't ask people what they think about it.
Yeah,
We'll make
we'll-
our own decisions.
No, we'll ask them in
Regardless of
a,
what everybody thinks, and we don't really
No,
want to.
Ernie, you willfully misconstruing what we're saying is getting a little tiresome. We've said, we will gather that information, we will seek input, but in a survey that we're trying to get concise, tabulatable responses, doing something that it has so much nuance and layer and construction is just not, it's counterproductive. It is counterproductive.
I guess, look, I'm not trying to be disingenuous, I'm trying to be.
Can we vote on this and then move
Understanding
on?
that I think
Is that
that,
possible?
yeah, I mean, I think the issue is that we're trying to, a survey is designed to get the maximum amount of input from the maximum amount of people. Public hearings, you're never gonna get the maximum amount of input from the maximum number of people, right? You're just gonna get, some people who come down and then if you base your regulations on a few people that come to the hearing and express their opinions, and that's influencing it, and you ignore the broader commentary from more people, I think that the public would perceive that as being, kind of avoiding asking the hard questions that,
The survey is not asking for opinions, it's asking for what their behaviors are.
it's asking for opinions, it's asking for opinions
No,
too.
what question in there is asking for opinions?
Why shouldn't you ask for people's opinions?
Just observation.
That's not what this
That's not where
survey
we
is.
are.
The survey
That's not what the survey, scope of the survey is for.
There's a lot of opinions. Do you find adequate parking? If you seem
That's an
like,
observation.
So I think that the committee was developed so that we could, outreach is a huge part of our job. And so
Right.
if that means that we're all gonna go door to door to hand out flyers to as many places that we can walk, then that's how we're gonna get people in here. It's not gonna be a few people. Our goal is to try to get as many people in here
I know that's
per
our goal,
meeting.
but the reality is it's not
Well,
gonna
the
happen.
reality is we need to do better than what they were able to do. And they did a great job at trying to get them. So the reality is it's up to us to get more people in to comment. So that we're not then being yelled at by residents saying you didn't do a good enough job.
And the reality is, we'll never be able to get everyone. You're only ever gonna get a representative sample, no matter what the format. And the reality is, some percentage of this town is not gonna be happy with whatever we propose. Period.
I mean,
So, you know.
don't get me wrong, I completely understand what you're talking about. I just think it's a bit, it's a bit disingenuous to say we don't wanna ask you this question because we think we know the answer and we don't wanna hear it.
that's
No,
not what I'm
but
getting,
if
that's not what I'm
even
saying.
if it
That's
said-
exactly the way this discussion is going, and I
Even if
feel
it said,
uncomfortable
if
with
we put this question out and it said, and the response was 95% saying, yes, we wanna pay for parking.
Wouldn't that be
What-
part of your but wouldn't
What
that
do
be
we do
justified?
with that? Because that's meaningless, right? Because would we even wanna propose parking? Because maybe when we think it all through, that's not a good proposal. Now everyone's expecting us to put, to generate revenue for the town through parking. Maybe that's what their thinking is. And we come out and say, no, we're not gonna do that, right? Like, it doesn't, the information we get from this is not gonna help us define a recommendation.
Well, it might, right?
It
So you'd
would
ignore it?
not for that question, right? The rest of this, where we're getting information about how people use the parking, yes. But an opinion piece on an undefined proposal that we're not even proposing yet, to me, right, the information we gather from that, whether it's positive or negative, doesn't help us move our effort along at all. I don't know what I would do with that information.
Yeah, it's
whether
not, I mean, are you willing to pay for parking? Yes, great, it's gonna be $400 for every 20 minutes, right? Oh, you didn't tell me that. Oh, actually, it's only gonna be
I mean, you
1
wouldn't,
cent for 1 minute.
You wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't,
Be
but
real-
but
be
what would you
realistic,
do?
I mean.
What would you do? You don't know because we haven't outlined any of the specifics. It's just not a helpful question. There's not enough context. It's not that none of us wanna talk about paid parking as an option. We all wanna talk about paid parking as
You
an
just don't
option.
wanna
Just
ask
not in
anybody
a
else
survey.
about it.
No, we wanna ask people
you know
about
what?
it when we can provide context.
What I'm thinking is when we have some fleshed out ideas, there's nothing stopping us from doing another
I
survey.
would love to do another survey entirely about paid parking and all the different options it could be.
Yes.
But one question of are you willing to pay
Right.
for parking it is counterproductive.
So I think that would be useful, so if we come up with some proposed regulations that we should.
A follow-up survey at another time, at another time, absolutely.
And hopefully, right out of this, we get a big robust email list. And then we can follow up with everyone on those, on the more detailed ideas of.
I think under
how to
those
regulate
conditions, I would agree not to put it in for now, but I think at some point we have to ask the question.
Yeah.
Ask the question on the regulation of the policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
How about electric charging stations? I would use an electric parking spot, yes. Now, sometime in the future, I'd walk 5 to 10 minutes to get it, and I'd pay to use it.
I don't even think we can have that many electric charging things to begin with.
Yeah, I
Like-
don't know, is that in the infrastructure?
No, we're gonna have the discussion next meeting.
But that's only For this,
We're gonna
or?
have that
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's something that people have asked to be part of what
But
we're
I know
considering.
like, we're only going with 3 electric charging things at the train station, library, and what was the other one?
Street.
Yeah, so in the grand scheme of things, that's only 3. We're never gonna have like 50 in Reading, maybe 10, 20 years from now. But we're never gonna hit 50 for this question to even matter.
So it's a moot point to just.
It's because they,
Okay.
they
Sounds
are,
like there's some plans already in place
Because,
and,
because
Yeah.
There's 3 in the works.
what Julie had suggested is that this, the RMLD was coming next meeting to present us with some proposals on, I didn't realize that the decision has
They're
already been
giving
made.
their proposal or what they're planning.
In the spirit of this survey, I think it's probably important for us to understand how many people have electric cars and would use
Yeah.
but they have the data already for the amount of residential excise tax or something, right? Somehow you have a record of, so they already have that info.
well, they have the now data, but we're also talking about in the future, right? As we're trying to envision long-term planning, right?
Like for me knowing I'm getting an electric vehicle next year, I don't think any of this stuff even matters to me, personally. And that's just how I view the
But
question.
a lot of
What do you
people are
mean?
advocating for a lot of spaces for electric parking.
But it's gonna,
Charging stations,
it's
so I
going
mean,
to, if we already have a parking problem to begin with, and then making a spot for electric vehicles only is just gonna compound the issue, I think.
yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah,
what.
again, we're not making the recommendations, we wanna understand the.
Just is there demand for
the
charging
demand,
spaces?
yes. And if there's
It's not a
already.
commitment to, like, you get them,
But for me, Reading, the reason that people come to Reading is the schools, family, etc. They're not coming here like Hampton Beach, where you're driving an hour, 2 hours to get to your spot, which would mean you would want to charge up. Most people who have electric cars in Reading who would come to downtown Reading are charging at home for the night. I don't see how it would be a worthwhile spot for them to have in the first place, nor why would they use it? If they're already in
If they're here for 2
Reading.
hours or less.
yeah, no, I mean, I guess they probably
Unless they
wouldn't, but.
drove here to go to work and
Yeah.
takes them a long time to drive and they didn't have a chance to charge. I just know in Rockport, I know they're putting in a ton of electric charging stations.
But that's like,
That's a
I could see it's a destination,
but
I
it's
could see
still-
myself
But it's still
driving.
within X hours
that
of
far, yeah.
driving. I mean,
But someone from Rhode Island
Yeah.
would go to Rockport. Someone from Rhode Island isn't coming to Reading to do,
yeah,
What
I
again?
think the other issue too is that a lot of people, instead of charging at the house, they're charging on the street. So they want more on-street
I just-
charging, so they don't have to charge at their house.
it's a very, I don't know, for me,
That's sort
it's,
of the other
if I can
issue.
afford
So there's a
electric.
contingent that's really pushing for that. So that has an effect on parking.
I still think it's important to understand the demand. What we do with that,
Why don't we leave this on, count up the questions, and if there's room for it, leave it.
I'm not opposed to it, I'm just
I think
wondering
it should
that,
just be reworded, because I think that's just,
yes,
do you see the need for rechargeable, just kind of narrow it down a little
I
bit.
might consider.
I
Just
would
a
use,
one-liner?
I would
So
use it.
yeah, like a,
Well, I would
Or
I would
two
use one
lines.
now or sometime in the future, I think that's great,
Yeah.
right,
actually.
but
I
I
like-
wouldn't put I would walk 5 to 10 minutes tonight.
Yeah, we don't need
Yeah.
the walking.
And I wouldn't put the pay thing for it, because
Yeah.
frankly, they should
Right,
pay
we don't
for
know.
it, but.
Yes.
But do they pay for it?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but we can get into that, like,
Yeah,
that's again
no.
another detail thing that we don't have, it's just, would you use one if it were there?
I guess I don't have an electric vehicle yet to know if I would use it. Without me having one, I'd currently say there's no way on planet Earth in Reading I would ever use one of these, but who knows if that's actually true or not. Because I would just
Well, and I
plug
think
it
we're
in
gonna
at
hear
my
a little
house.
bit from RMLD next time too, that might give us,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's a good question.
I had one other question, I think I mentioned it the very first night, which would be designated spots for rideshare or
That's
Uber,
yeah, I like,
Uber
that
Eats,
seems,
Amazon.
That seems more worthwhile than the
I think
electric,
there
the
was-
amount of people that would actually be doing that, cause that people aren't, once again, coming to Reading for, as opposed to, there's obviously a billion Amazon, Uber, everything all over the place.
So the question, I'm just trying to, I think there is, right there, that's gonna be an issue. I think the question, there's two questions that I think come up with that, is, one is something like, do you, if you use a rideshare vehicle, do they have, can they find someplace to pull over to stop to board and for you to get in and get out? Right, so
Don't they
that's,
usually double park anyway?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question is like, do we need, like, and I don't know what the,
Yeah, I wonder
But
if, I wonder,
I've
I
never
guess we
had-
should ask the question, because I don't even know the answer, how many people are doing Uber Eats or Uber deliveries around? I
I've
have
never
no
had
well, the
parking
deliveries
space.
versus the
deliveries.
rideshare,
yeah,
there's two
there's
different.
things, yeah. Because Uber Eats and all that, you have to go park, cause you have to go in and wait for the food to get
Oh,
cut
see,
and
I'm
you
under
pick
the
it up.
mentality of someone is coming to me, you're talking about them going there to pick it up.
Oh,
So
but if
that's
you're
two
going
different- Yeah.
to drop it off, yeah, it's the same as the pizza guy, right? That's been happening forever. What do they do?
Right, what does the pizza guy
What's
do?
the pizza guy do? Yeah.
I think the prime is the number one, because the prime
And
vans
that-
are everywhere.
That's the second thing that I was gonna
Yeah.
get to is, you know,
Commercial.
What does UPS do?
Double park.
They just park wherever
except
they
the
want.
Prime is, right? I mean, Prime's everywhere all the time.
Yep, so is UPS. So is FedEx.
FedEx.
I'm downtown all day,
Yeah.
every day,
So
seeing
the
the
average
drivers.
person in the neighborhood is getting their Amazon Prime free delivery. I mean, the
But that
van-
doesn't
But that
have
may
anything to
be-
do with downtown.
That may be
Well,
more
for people who
of
live
a,
downtown, it does.
of a,
Correct.
And actually, some businesses have stuff
yeah.
delivered too.
I was
But
gonna
some
say
gets
that
delivered,
may
but it
be
is
more
just- it is
noticeable
more-
in neighborhoods because, right, in a neighborhood, you don't have FedEx there
Right.
every day, all the day, which you do downtown
Yeah.
for forever, right? Now you see Amazon, you know, all the time in residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So you're noticing it more, but like downtown,
Yeah.
like I know for me,
Yeah.
in my store, I get USPS every day, I get UPS every day, I get FedEx every day. I most certainly do not get the Evil Empire ever in my store. But, you know, so those delivery trucks are there every
Right.
day, not
Yeah.
just for, like all the
Yeah.
businesses, like we
Yeah.
all know the UPS
Yeah.
drivers
Right,
and blah, blah,
right.
blah. So it is a delivery thing, so it's like, are you making special accommodations for one kind of delivery vehicle over another? Do you suddenly need to, is there suddenly a new need? That's what I'm asking, like.
No, the question that I have is more of a planning question is, you know, are we accommodating, is there an issue, whether it's Amazon or FedEx, or like, is there an issue in downtown where we need to provide more space for them?
Right, cause they do not pull into parking spaces.
No, they do not.
And that
Right.
includes the Evil Empire, they
Yeah.
do not pull into
Yes.
parking
But
spaces.
does that have to do with this survey? Because if I answered that question.
Probably not.
No.
No,
So I
It's
think
not.
that would be a different.
Why would, well, if you're gonna high-hosey some spots for like Instacart and Prime, wouldn't we need to put that in this?
Yeah, I
mean,
would think
it's-
so.
it would,
they don't use spots.
that's the whole idea, is like, we should make them have a spot, like in front of each of these,
It is a safety issue.
each of these 40R buildings should have it. Cause like,
For, yeah, okay, so
For-
you're saying the
for
residential
delivery and-
buildings, you want a place for, yeah,
And commercial, I mean.
whatever, in any
well,
case,
it's
I'm just
mostly
saying,
the
right now,
residential, yeah.
so if residential, if somebody is getting a UPS delivery in one of these buildings, you want the UPS to pull into a spot.
I don't see
No,
them
you-
doing it even if there's the
Yeah,
spot.
Of course
I
they
don't
won't.
either.
Yeah, you
That's
have
what I'm
to-
saying.
It's more of a, right, that's more of a traffic flow
Yeah.
issue, traffic
It's a-
congestion issue than parking,
They
right?
create their own spot.
Big
Right, they're
deal,
not,
but I don't-
they're not gonna use spots if you make them.
I don't think that's the case, cause there's so many. Like the Instacart, they're just average cars, you know?
Yes.
And
An Instacart may, but that, yeah, an Instacart person may.
We can have an Instacart / electric charging spot. We solve it all.
But, you know, I guess you'd ask
Maybe
the
we'll-
question, if you live downtown and you relied on some parking, you want that parking given up because somebody else isn't willing to go get their own groceries. Like, Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't wanna make a dedicated spot that can only be for that.
If you have one spot and it's for short-term
Delivery, yeah.
delivery, Uber,
So a 30-minute spot,
Instacart, Prime.
so a
yeah.
30-minute spot, so
No,
not
no,
specifying,
no, Pickup delivery only.
Just like, you know,
or a 15-minute spot.
15-minute.
Like there are plenty of those spots all around.
Right, so I don't think you need
A
to,
lot of
I don't think you need
cities
to
have
dictate what the use is, cause there are multiple, and that's why we have some of the 15-minute
Yeah.
spots that we have. Right, cause you have those turnover
Those aren't for
spots.
deliveries, those,
Why aren't they,
because they're always occupied
for
otherwise.
15 minutes?
But if they're,
Like
they're
people
constantly turning
shopping.
over, but I mean, there's always, I mean, many commercial, a lot of zoning requires the buildings to have a drop-off and pickup, a delivery zone.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all around
Yes,
Boston.
that's true.
So it's a delivery zone, not
They're
for, no parking,
they're commercial,
delivery zone.
they're commercial zones is what, right, in Boston.
Some of them,
Right,
some of
it's-
them are, but no, commercial is different than a delivery.
They're absolutely commercial zones.
Yeah.
I know that.
There are commercial zones and there are delivery. There are two, we're talking about two separate things. I think, and that's, I think.
Yeah, I think Jay, this is part of your
Expertise.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a delivery zone unless it was on
A private
pickup
property,
drop off that's
yeah.
on private property.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the.
Yeah.
That's the
Or
point. But you
public-
see it all around,
Sure.
you see it all around Cambridge, Somerville. I mean, what's happening now is that they've got a lane of traffic, parking, a bike lane, and then a commercial store that gets loads of deliveries. And you try to drive down these single roads and there's a UPS truck parked outside the parking, outside the bike lane, outside the sidewalk. And then the poor guys, I mean, it's dangerous as heck. He's trying to pull off cases of heavy goods to carry them through the parking, across the bike lane, across the sidewalk, into the store. And meanwhile, it's all one lane of traffic, and you're trying to get by all this stuff.
So
I
in
mean,
the
it's-
interest of
it's-
time,
So
do you
to get
wanna
back to
do
our survey,
something like this, back to survey? Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
is there a question that we actually need to ask about?
Delivery zones or drop-off zones.
If I was answering this survey, I wouldn't know why it would be there.
I agree. I think we need to think through it more, but I don't know that asking people how beneficial they're gonna be about knowing about commercial zones.
That, to me, delivery downtown involves her, it involves him, it doesn't involve me at all
I think
as a
it
customer.
involves a very minute amount, just like the electric currently would end up occupying a very minute amount that we're spending a massive amount of time on currently talking about.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a question, how much double parking is going on? Because you can't get a parking space because there's a delivery going on.
I definitely believe that we'll talk about it at some point. I don't think that has to do with the survey that we're trying
Yeah, I
to
don't
do.
think there's a question that we need to ask about it.
It exists now.
The one, I guess, the one thing that I was thinking is that this is the one vehicle, this is the one vehicle where we could get information about, about Uber, Lyft,
Ride shares.
rideshare, sort of parking needs and, right, because we're not gonna get that information from anywhere else.
Or
So do we wanna
and I
say,
don't
do
know-
you utilize rideshare services downtown?
I think we could do that on the,
Yes, and so how does that affect parking?
can't we do that on that big question that
Oh, the big grid?
Yeah,
yeah.
like rideshare could be one of the grid questions, right?
Well, no, because the grid is, I need you, like, why do I park
I
downtown?
think
So
that
it's
was
a
a
separate.
question on one of the
But I mean,
surveys, and
you
it's
could be-
like a.
Rideshare is a parking reason.
It's a 2 or 3%, it's a 2 or 3% answer. How do you get to
How
downtown?
do you get downtown?
And rideshare, was one of the questions, and it was,
And I think
Yeah.
ride shares are used a lot at night, not necessarily during the
Yes,
day,
yeah.
unless it's an employee coming to work by a ride share, and I'm not sure that the night parking issue is.
Right.
It's a minor.
I mean, it's clearly a big industry. And people come and go. Question is, does it take up a parking space?
Well,
Or should it?
maybe, really, I think the one place we should add it is question number 3, maybe?
Which page?
How do you get downtown? Drive my vehicle, travel on non-motorized vehicle, walk, or ride share.
Right here, yeah, let's do that.
Solves the problem.
Yes.
But
But
what
isn't that-
about
isn't that
knowing
a-
if, do you order from Prime delivery and do you get Instacart?
But we're
That,
talking about downtown.
I think Prime
Like,
is the
if you
same
have
as UPS.
Prime, I get Prime,
Oh, I
but
see,
that
I
doesn't
see.
impact
Someone who's
downtown at
not
all.
from downtown could answer that question.
Right, and it
It's not
won't,
really relative.
it's not relevant.
Well, so, I mean, you could
I
put,
get
you could put it up in the first option, drive my vehicle / rideshare, or different, or just rideshare as a,
We're gonna add
Rideshare
rideshare
needs
as
its
one of
own-
the.
as a second
Yeah,
rideshare.
Yeah,
Because
because
that would,
it's a
presumably that would
different,
not require a parking space.
right,
That's why you
yes,
ask it.
yes, yeah, it's a different parking profile. It doesn't go away, although it may, right? It's something we need to think about.
It's not likely to go away.
No, I mean, the parking need
For a
Right.
rideshare.
for rideshare.
We did look at adding specific spaces to the train station dedicated to ride shares, and it was found through the 2018 parking study that we don't have the density or need for such right now, and that might have changed in the last 2 or 3 years due to all these developments coming online. But we did look at that.
Well, if that was 2018, of course, I mean, now we got all this high density
Right,
coming in.
that's why I said it might have
cost, so.
changed, yeah.
I think to me, I feel like if you had at least one spot, to be prepared.
you could do it with the electric spot as well.
I think it's a great conversation to have later, because I have some interesting thoughts on that too.
Excellent.
All right, you ready to go through the question?
All right, so we need to format
We're gonna vote?
what we have. Yeah,
How many do we have, and we can go from there?
Marty has it. You have it, right? Right, you number one.
I'm not, I didn't number them, so
Two.
I'm gonna have to, so here we go. Change your age, one. Andrew, how would we get this survey sort of, you know, formatted and up on an electronic and printed and such?
So electronic, it's a bit of a different question. Somebody needs a SurveyMonkey account or Bizarre or whatever it is that you would prefer. We found SurveyMonkey usable.
Is this what we're shooting for?
If that's what you're shooting for, I'll
That's
send I'll send you this Word doc and you can use it to your discretion. And
And that has a QR code on it too, so.
so you'd have to replace that QR code, but
I like the layout of this, and I think if we just condense the top part, and we'll have some room for more
Yeah.
questions right here, or whatever, so.
so yeah, I can send you this in a Word doc if we haven't already.
Is that what you do, Chris? Do you do formatting? You can just take Bernie's notes and do that?
I can, yeah, I mean, I can do whatever you want for any of this. As long as I have something that's accurate, I can put it all and do whatever you guys want. I mean, this is basic for me. I need to have lots of flashy things going on.
You gonna need it on paper or something?
Yes, bright pink paper.
So if you want an online version, I would have to check to see Recreation has an account, but I don't know that we're able to use it for this committee.
So you
So
have
if
to,
somebody has a SurveyMonkey account existing,
do you have to pay for SurveyMonkey?
We could do a Google form, that's free.
well,
Is that
is
Are we
that an
allowed?
online survey? Sure, whatever works, as long as it
I say,
The free
it looks like
version
we
of
have 15
SurveyMonkey
questions.
does not capture the
There's not a
data
lot.
the
That's
same
not
way
saying,
the
there's
paid
no way we
version
have 15
does,
questions, really?
in my
I think
understanding.
I counted 12, so I don't know.
I've
That
got
sounds like-
13, but.
That sounds
Okay,
like
we
it
already
would
got
be.
15, so let's figure out what we got, let's see what we did.
Well, and maybe, I may have also,
Yeah, do you wanna go down the list real quick?
I'll find out how much SurveyMonkey is, and if it's something pointless, I'll pay for it.
Okay.
If-
Cause it's
Yeah,
almost
I mean,
10:30.
And I'll say I have another copy.
Oh my God.
This is
Otherwise,
early.
I mean, look, it's late, I'll double check it, but I don't think that's terribly wrong. I think the problem is we cut out a lot of questions, which probably makes it look longer than what we have remaining.
How many pages, well, it's gonna get, when you make the table, it'll be
The
smaller.
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
table's gonna cut out a lot of space,
One sheet.
and,
Bernie, before we finalize it, could I just want to be sure, I know this came up in the discussion earlier this evening. One of the questions I want to be sure, and when I went back over, I didn't see it, but I thought we were going to put a question in, if someone has a better wording of it than I do, is the question parking destination when driving downtown. A,
Yes.
CVS lot, B, Brandy
Yeah.
Court, C, Common. Did we,
Oh,
are
I
we
see.
putting
I
something?
thought we
at the-
said that was in the, I mean, I think it's a pretty good idea, because it does give you another part of the demand equation.
Yeah, I just didn't see, it, so
You're right.
that is on
How
there?
many,
No, we didn't
how
put that
many
in.
lots, I mean, how detailed do you wanna be? I mean, you wanna put
Those are.
streets, I mean, cause the
Those,
issue
I
is-
think the two most popular lots, and then C, they can describe where they go, Town Hall, or they go over to McDonald's or Rite Aid, or wherever they go, but I
Maybe the
I
two
think
major
what would,
lots, then street
what
and then
would
other.
come
and then
out of
list.
this is that I think we will see where a lot of cars are going and where the demand is, and I think it would be very helpful for us as a committee to understand where the greatest
Yeah.
demand in town is for parking, where the pressure is.
I think it's an absolutely important question.
And if someone has another spot, those are the two that I think are most
So,
used
so
right now.
repeat them for me again?
One is the CVS parking lot.
so the back one or the
We shouldn't call
front
it
one?
this, we shouldn't call it the CVS lot,
Well,
should we?
no,
But that's
I
what
don't
people
know.
call it,
That is what
right?
people
That's
call
what
it.
people
Is there,
call it.
is there an official?
I don't even know what the
There
name
is not
of
an
it.
official name, no.
No, but I'm
I
asking,
think we
I'm
need to
asking, do
call
you
it
mean
CVS
behind
lot.
CVS or in front of CVS?
That's
Yeah.
the cobblestone
Oh.
parking
CVS
behind.
rear or
Yeah,
So
CVS
CVS
rear.
rear lot,
CVS rear in,
CVS front lot,
I think if you wanna say cobblestone parking.
cobblestone lot?
those
Yeah.
are, yeah, either at town hall or CVS.
Is the Harmden Street lot used, or what's the story with that one?
It is a public parking lot, it's not discussed a lot, I think it's a,
Is that the one behind the artist formerly known as Walgreens?
yes, so there's a lot of
So
private spaces
part of that
there.
now is employee parking, it is 2-hour parking or employee parking all
Yeah.
day with permit, and so that's where I park as
Okay,
for work, FYI.
okay.
is a lot full during the
I
day.
wasn't sure if you could
Alright,
park there.
ebbs and flows, you can now.
Does it have, so it has signs that say you can park there?
It says, so it has the old 2-hour parking
Okay.
or employee, now right now,
Okay.
nothing's being enforced.
Yes, I know.
So you can, the sky's the limit, but
Okay.
it's as if, it's just like the lots of your, or any downtown
would-
spot, like 2 hours.
I would
The
think
brand-
that the 4 things that we certainly wanna list, and maybe 5, is CVS rear lot.
Yeah.
The
Brandy Court.
Brandy Court lot,
Brandy, B-R-A-N-D-E,
D
Court,
Court,
C-O-U-R-T.
commuter rail station.
Commuter
Whatever this
rail,
train station.
yeah, I have train station parking, but I
Depot.
mean,
Is it
Okay,
Depot
sure,
parking.
sure.
And then
but
the one
depot,
behind-
but does depot parking include,
that
it includes all
extra-
the streets up
Yeah, I
and
mean-
around, right?
Right, I mean, people are gonna pick what, I mean,
How about depot permitted parking? Cause that would.
well, there's all
cover-
those spots that used to be leased parking. In fact, we didn't really touch on this last time when we were late. All those spots in front of
High Street.
Yeah, and on High Street, that used to be leased spots are now just public parking, which I don't think people really
For free?
get.
No, I think
Well,
it's
it's still
2
on
hours, isn't it?
parking.
Is it 2 hour or 4 hour?
It's the 2 hour,
Oh,
it's the,
So it's not
After 10
commuter
o'clock.
rail parking.
right, so it's not, you don't need a permit for that, it's just,
Right,
Well, the depot, you don't need a permit after 10:30.
yeah, but you effectively need it if
Right,
you're
right,
using it.
but back in
Yeah.
the.
But that
What is
would
the name of
include-
the
but-
parking lot
But
behind?
what's, there are many
Atlantic?
streets that
Yeah.
go
That one's Brandy?
above and
Oh,
around
what's the
there
one
that
that I
are
was talking about? Oh,
also,
Harndon, sorry.
so you could just say
I mean, right,
depot/resident.
the general idea here is where are you headed, you know? Right, I don't think we need to be too
Yeah.
detailed, like, are you headed to the depot area? Are you headed to
Yeah, let them tell
the
us.
Brandy
Yeah.
Court?
Yeah.
Are you are you headed to behind CVS? Do you park on the street?
Right.
That's it. I think, right, the other place would be the town lot, but it's not even a public parking lot, so we could include that.
So I jotted it down as CVS rear lot, CVS cobblestone lot, Brandy Court lot, depot parking, on Main Street, on Haven Street, other. Cause I feel like versus are actually kind of two
Yeah.
different zones.
And this is, the word would be typically,
Is it Main
I
Street?
wrote usually, but whatever.
yeah, all right, usually.
When I park downtown, my favorite parking spots are, or my
Is it I prefer to park at? Is that?
preferred.
Now that I'm thinking about this, I will just verify I am allowed to even create the survey.
Right, should one of us, right,
Because of
one of
what-
us should do it, one of us, let's,
Because of your legal,
Did I take, oh, that's
Oh,
yours?
no, this is.
Do you mind
this
doing
is
it?
mine.
is that what you were just saying, you were gonna take it?
I can try.
Okay, that's
You
awesome.
send me the template, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you creating the paper and the online or just the paper version? I'm not trying to put
I
you in
was
a corner, I'm
gonna
asking.
create- Oh, you can do the, no, you
No,
don't
he
wanna-
can't, we're gonna have him
I'll
not.
just do the paper.
Okay.
How's that? Anybody else?
If you do the paper and send it to me,
You'll do Survey Monkey?
I will,
Or
I will online it.
Google? Okay.
Thank you. 'cause
Are we
I
all
have no
comfortable with
idea
that?
how-
So you're giving me this and then you're gonna email that to me?
Yeah,
And I'll
I'll
just,
see what
I'll
I can
email
come
it.
up with.
So before I mark it up, how do I circulate it to make sure everybody agrees with what I wrote up?
You can't.
You can't, and so
Send it
that's
to
why,
you?
Yeah.
And you send it to everybody else? Okay.
All right, looking at we did a lot of work today, I think. Complete new survey, parking survey. We didn't discuss how to participate in the Reading Fall Street Fair.
I sent you guys the link
Yes,
to
you did.
register.
So what-
Grab a table.
So we'll all have to man that,
Okay, I can't man it, I
occupy
can't
that.
go
What date is that anyway, I forget?
Well,
12th, yep, Sunday the 12th.
I'm so sorry, I should bring a mask next
I-
year,
12 to 5.
It's just,
Yeah,
this is,
similar.
John can say this is fine.
okay, but in the future.
So how so
No, it's.
are they gonna, because I know there's a fee attached to it, so how is that going to work?
There's a fee to participate.
It's
Do we know how much?
$65 for the basic version of it, and since you're past the deadline, but we're past the deadline, there's like some,
I think they are
$50
waiving the
fee.
late fees right now,
are they okay?
generally.
But I wonder who's paying the money kind of scenario, or
I thought if you were a community event or something like this, that.
Yeah, John recommended registering as a local nonprofit. I don't know
Yeah.
if that waives your fee, I have no
I
idea.
think
You
it's
think just to register as the
I
parking?
think there's an
something?
exemption.
Well, you're gonna check off what type of
Yeah.
organization you
Oh.
are.
because I know I'm doing the dunk tank thing for 625 Main Street, so I could actually, for all the people that are coming up there, I could just have this available at that as well, as opposed to a dedicated. Now, I understand a dedicated one might get more people, or it may not.
I can certainly have it at my store too, we're
But-
open.
So I think I could have this, the paper copies and the QR code thing at the dunk tank thing, so people can, it's more exposure. So like I said, I don't know that's the freeway, cause I'm already paid for,
Is this
paying for it,
only gonna be open for that one day?
12 to
I was
5.
just thinking,
Oh,
Karen,
no,
is
well-
this, you and I could take these through the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, we might have to tweak it a little bit so that it doesn't say street fair.
Oh, it shouldn't say street fair,
shouldn't
this is just
say
our
anything.
survey, that's
Is
just the
it- I mean,
first
what
day
is-
that we're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know what it says at the beginning.
Doesn't say anything, really. What does it say?
Well, I feel like we have to have
We haven't made it
something.
yet, it doesn't say anything.
I just had like the PARC parking study 2021,
Sure thing.
I mean, it probably has to be very similar to this
parking
one.
survey.
Yeah.
The 2020 downtown parking survey?
2021, but yes.
Thank you.
I'll put it in the document, I'll clean it up and send it.
So for booth kind of scenario, for street fair itself, I will, every single person that comes there, I will make sure I tell them to scan the QR code.
You
And
can
I'll have the paper with
just
me as
put the
well.
QR code in
Oh, yeah, I'm
one of those
gonna.
acrylic frames and they can just
Yep.
take their phone. and
Exactly,
put it up
cause I'm gonna
there
have
with
one for
paper.
the payment anyway, for if people wanna pay some
Yeah.
optional way with Square and whatnot.
And we are open at the bookstore, so we'll have it there too.
Mm-hmm.
Are you open that day?
I have to check with the boss.
Yeah. So,
Are you reading trophy?
Yeah.
Say
Am I?
yes.
I think he was joking.
The baton has been passed.
his son is.
He was,
Oh, okay.
he was. I got many trophies from him.
So do we feel that that is sufficient for coverage at the street fair if we have it with you and with us?
And mine is gonna be at the angle of Gould and whatever on the V, which is conveniently right outside of this area,
So if we could just take some of these, I could make some and put them in those acrylic frames and we could go downtown, we could ask, can we leave this on your table?
Oh, yeah, you could do that as well,
Is that okay?
in conjunction.
Of course. There's no,
The more we get it out there,
yeah, I mean, the other issue is that we do need to, at some point, somebody needs to physically make copies.
I can do that.
Yeah, I
And
can make
make
a bunch of,
So
well,
if you-
the question
if
is,
you
what
leave
kind
them on
of
the table,
copies are we
someone's
gonna make?
go
Is this
back
gonna
and
be
collect them.
like standard copy paper, or will it be like some sort of a heavier
I
stock
assume it's just like
folded?
this.
Just standard copy paper, I
Or
mean,
just put it in, yeah, you can do it on a heavy paper and then put it in a plastic envelope, just one of
Oh
those
my
things.
God.
Or-
we're gonna have like a bake sale to pay for these supplies.
Oh, I have both, that stuff.
I have-
This is for other
I have some Staples money that
How
I
many
offered the
copies we
historic.
gonna make? A
And
couple
more
thousand?
bake sales.
I bet to make a few thousand,
You
right?
think 1,000?
Thousand, couple thousand.
I mean, if we're gonna hand
If
them
you're
out,
gonna have,
No.
if
right,
we're
if
gonna
you're gonna.
mail them out or,
I think
Get
more
them out.
people will scan a QR
We're just talking
code
about
before they'll
the
take a
street fair
paper.
at this time, right? This is
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
But
but
anything we
event-
don't
no,
hand out on
but
that day,
eventually-
the physical
eventually we're gonna
copies we
send-
should put in the library, we should put in the senior center, right? I mean, there's,
That's a good idea.
So I think
Yeah, I
we should
mean,
decide
that's-
how long is this gonna be?
How
That's
many
outside
people
the,
Yeah.
I think
Whoa.
that's beyond like the $25, $50 I can make copies thing when you're
I mean, I
getting
can
to
make,
the.
I can make a few thousand copies, that's not a big deal. I mean, I can do it. But I just, in terms of distribution, I think one of the other surveys had suggested, so on this page here, at the very end, I have options for distribution, townwide email addresses, social media, leverage merchants, shop owners, the customer, something we want to consider is recommended we include a question as to where water utility bills, recreation email addresses, police traffic boards.
Those take a while.
And I think Rotary, Rotary, Chamber, all these folks, and then the town meeting.
I think the town
Did you
meetings are
send it
good.
out to the town meeting?
I sent
was
your
that-
agenda to the town meeting for tonight.
Okay, so can we then send the surveys, presumably we can do the electronic survey to town meeting members?
Sure.
And then get them to distribute it to all their constituents within town?
the other question about the paper survey is where do they come back to? If they're not filling them out on the spot.
Is it good point? And who, are you gonna go there and actually pick them up from the people? Like, cause now there's no self-addressed stamped on.
Well, you have to have a box for them to drop it in, I suppose.
Jeez.
I think it should be only QR code then at the fair.
You don't wanna limit people
Yeah,
who
but
don't
you
have
gotta-
access to that.
Somebody
Yeah.
else, someone-
I wonder, I can collect, and Liz can do
Yeah, I'm
also
happy to, I
hers.
could certainly happy to have a
So,
spot at the store if that
If
is
they
helpful.
don't fill it out and give it back to Liz or I or whatever, then they're, like drop it in the town hall mailbox thing,
Yeah.
I guess?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll have to have that on the survey, drop
Okay,
off
Town hall
Okay.
only, or whatever, or
or mail to.
When is the survey over?
So that's the other thing, is the final, so if we started on the 12th, which is
Sunday.
the town, yeah, do we wanna do 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
A month or so at least.
Well, eventually we've gotta start tabulating it, remember,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have a remit, we gotta start tabulating the data and
Right.
using it.
I think you're gonna see the massive hit right in the beginning, which is gonna somewhat formulate where we go, but who knows?
When do water and electricity bills go out? I mean, water and
I
utility
don't know
bills
if they
go
were
out.
gonna allow us
I
to
don't
do
think
it
we can
though.
do that, yeah. Not this time around.
When does it normally go out though? Isn't it like,
Think September,
September,
but I
right?
could be wrong.
I don't think they would
But I
actually,
don't think.
they'd probably put a QR code on something that they would do, but
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna
There's
include
also
it
a cost
completely.
associated with that, and, yeah.
it's a long lead time to do that, isn't it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I know
I mean,
the
that was
thing
part
like
of the-
here's the leaf collecting and all that, like to have the little QR thing,
Yeah.
like I think
But one of the
you'd
other,
probably do that, but not put an individual piece.
I don't think you should leave it out too long. If people are gonna do it, they're gonna do it right away.
Why not the
and turn it in. I
31st?
think,
Yeah, but that
you
assumes
know,
everybody knows that
remember,
we're
we
even
only
here.
have a meeting the 15th, so that's gonna be, it won't be in effect then.
Nobody
We,
will.
maybe we wanna try and have it ready for, discussion on the 29th.
What about the 31st? What if we
So the
just
September
end of the
ends on
month
the
or
30th,
30th, well,
Well, what if we do it to the stat, what if you do September 12th to October 2nd is a Saturday?
I mean, wasn't this originally, we were motivated by taking a pulse of people coming downtown for the street fair, wasn't that?
Yeah.
But we didn't wanna
Yeah, but
limit
we
it to
said
that
that
because
that was
that's
not
not a
gonna be very
typical day.
Oh, okay.
That'd be a very biased sample.
Right, so we wanna like have them downtown and stuff too, so that
Okay,
if you come downtown on a Tuesday, it's like, yeah, this is what just happened.
okay.
And we're gonna try to get like QR codes at the, like at various parking lots. Like if you park here, please give us your survey, so people presumably would. Now, whether we have it as paper or just QR codes at those
it's gotta be
locations.
QR for that kind of thing. Cause otherwise,
And then,
it gets wet,
you
who
do it
knows?
all, yeah, you can do it, you have the QR codes posted like at all the parking lots, commuter rail.
So you think that they're
Wherever.
gonna go up and read it and scan their thing and do the survey as opposed to
It's
somebody
more,
standing there?
I think you have to do businesses, you have to get a couple businesses involved, like Liz, or the restaurants just seem massively easy while you're waiting for your food, like scan this thing, like I don't know why they wouldn't do it, cause they want the parking problem solved. Which brings.
I would suggest a short URL over a QR code. I mean, do both,
You
but
do both, yeah.
make sure you have a short URL on everything that's a QR code.
I think there are.
Short URL.
This
So rather than be
website-
like downtown Reading parking survey, blah, blah, blah.com, just be
Oh.
like park.com,
Oh, okay.
Use the code,
Okay.
use the initials, it's PPMs.
And I can try to come up with something pithy for that, whenever I know what the URL is. So that we can, like whatever the long URL is from the Google Doodle poll or whatever you guys do.
Yeah.
Whatever we decide to do, then I will, I can do the short URL.
Actually,
Okay.
do you wanna do this, Jay? You sound like much more qualified than me.
Except you have the physical piece of
We have a
paper
web
now.
person. that does
Well, you're
it.
gonna do just the
I mean,
physical
I got
one,
some
right?
guys, we got some programs at work,
I can do the physical.
Right.
I'll ask them how hard it is for them to do this stuff. I mean, I know it's not hard.
Alright, so end date for the survey, 12th to, do we think 2 weeks is a reasonable amount of time?
No, not at all. We could have a lot, I mean, I think we have a lot longer.
Well,
I mean, people don't even know we exist. How are we gonna get the word out? I think we
Well,
gotta
they,
get
I
the word
mean,
out.
it's been in the paper twice, it's been in, I mean,
we're ending in December.
right, we gotta get,
Yeah.
alright, how about 3 weeks?
Well,
One,
let's
two.
work backwards, right? So if it were 3 weeks, that would
Oh
bring
wait,
us
that's
to
October 2nd, yeah.
to what? That would bring us to
October 2nd.
October 2nd. So then our next meeting is, after that is October 13th.
Yeah.
So does that give us enough time to get the data and crunch it and be able to have a discussion on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to just.
I think
Because,
so.
right, and I think, right,
mean,
I think if we can't do it, really, we could do it in, a day or two, but, whether anyone has that capacity to. if we leave it out there too much longer, then we'll miss, we won't have that data for that,
To react to, yeah.
for that date, and so we push off another 2 weeks. So I think I think that's a good,
The second,
yeah.
So
Or
September
else-
12th to October.
Or else leave it out, Bernie, for another 2 weeks after that.
Look, if we could just,
5 weeks.
it's dynamic, right? We just find out what we have when we have it. And if we get 10 responses, we gotta keep going, right? I mean, we have to have some sort of objective to do a broader catchment than what's done before us. That's part of the problem, right? That's what we're charged with.
well, that's for this data, that doesn't mean we
Yeah.
can't we're gonna continue reaching out to other people to
Yeah.
get their opinion on other things, so.
Yeah. I mean,
So why don't we
I
say,
don't think this is gonna be
we're
a
planning
massive
to end
thing.
it on October 2nd, but
Yeah.
if we have not collected
If we
sufficient
have more
data, we will
we'll
extend
collect
it.
it as it comes
Because I
in.
do think you need to have
It's not like we're gonna-
a deadline, right?
Yeah.
Right,
You
so Barney,
make
is
sure
that
to
good? We'll
finish
plan to end on
your
October
survey
2nd,
by
but if
X,
there's not
you know,
sufficient.
Put a date
and
on
I'll
there,
do
or
it like
people are
the
just gonna leave it.
right, yeah, you have to have that end date.
Yeah, I think we could try to get it out to like the PTOs. I think we were talking about different school clubs, school.
The good news is, we can get it out for the 12th, and then at our meeting on the 15th, discuss where else we want to put it.
Town meeting.
Right, that's not the end. This is not the end.
town website. I mean, do we have an email address yet for the park?
We don't know that we're ever getting one, we don't necessarily qualify for that.
An email, yeah.
Okay, the other,
It would, IT could set that up in 30 seconds. It's just a
Yeah.
distribution group that doesn't cost them anything.
yeah,
So they could have park@readingma.
yeah, I mean, there's no harm in having it, right?
Sorry, reading.ma.us.
Is there a policy issue there that
I'll check on it. And I
We're
will
looking for
update
public
you.
input, why would we not wanna have public input? I mean,
I think we do need an email address to just,
Do we use
Just-
Julie's address?
I think that anyone should probably submit to Julie or I. That would be my preference, so that we're aware of it. We can forward it right to you guys. And
That's what Julie had said at a previous meeting, I think email should go to her.
but I think for me, someone's gonna have to know Julie.Mercier as opposed to
Yeah.
Park, just PARC at
put
Reading.
it
just-
right on the
Yeah.
survey. Can
just put it, just get an email address, see if we can get an email address, we'll put it on the survey and.
But they could have a distribution group where it gets emailed to Park, but it still goes to only Julie, and then she could do
Or-
whatever with it.
Yeah.
It's more of something small, easier.
I would suggest, Bernie, you email Bob and ask if we can get an email address,
Fair enough.
right? You have to work within the organization, right? So.
Approve the minutes, any other business? Talking about outreach, we'll try to maximize the reach, so we have, I guess we're all gonna try to get the survey out to as many people as we can. You guys do it for the businesses, and we'll just try to get it out to as many people.
Do you wanna go over the map, like the downtown
Yeah.
map?
So we can meet the two of us, right? Yeah.
I'm getting a little.
So I think at the meeting on the 15th, we can, again, the survey at that point will only have been live for 3 days, we can discuss further distribution options.
So our next meeting is on the 15th at 5
to 6:30
to 6:30, yeah,
Here,
here.
here.
So yeah, Christine Amendola from the police department was going to come to answer questions on employee and resident permit data that you may have.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
To push that off because of the short time frame, just let me know so I can get her a new date. Because RMLD is coming as well to just present the EV charging locations to you guys to inform you of that initiative. And then if you want to discuss survey too, it's kind of a lot to cram into an hour and a half.
There's some other data that, this is on the last page. If you wouldn't mind trying to collect that and send it along to us, It's just a list of these things. If anybody has other things that we could ask for, please add to it, but,
You say
was thinking if
traffic
we could-
flow data, you're asking cars that drive on Main Street?
yeah, well, just through Reading, kind of, I don't know. I know that I talked to, was it Officer Hayes, is he the, I think I probably have his name wrong, but he's the traffic enforcement. But anyway, he had a lot of that data, and I'm not sure if Ryan
Percival is the town engineer.
might,
Yeah,
I don't think he
might
has
have
it, I think that the police department has more of
Yeah.
that, but. I don't know if we can get retail customer count data, that would be really helpful from the
We don't
various
have a tool
businesses.
for it.
You wouldn't have it, but I know the businesses would have it.
Brendan, can I
themselves.
ask, due to the fact that it is 10:53,
Yeah.
could we maybe work on this another time? Do
Sure.
other data requests?
I got the list, thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah, so if you've got the list, we can work on it offline. Sounds great. Anybody motion to adjourn?
Need a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you.
Alright,
Thanks, Jay,
Thank
for coming
you,
far.
Jay.
Don't try.
thanks guys.